now be recorded.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the South Burlington City Council meeting for June 17th, 2024. We will begin with reciting the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. Lori, would you like to lead us?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I will now go to instructions on exiting the building in case of an emergency and review of technology options. Jesse Baker, City Manager.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for those in the room for being here. If there's an emergency in this room, you can go out either side of the rear of the auditorium and then turn left or right to get outside. For those who are participating remotely, thank you for joining us as well. If you'd like to speak during any item on our agenda, you can turn your camera on and the chair will call on you, or you can indicate that you would like to speak in the chat and I will have the chair call on you. Other than that, we are not monitoring the chat for content.
Thank you. Next is the agenda review. Does the council have any additions, deletions, or changes in the order of the agenda items tonight? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda tonight. Are there any online or in the auditorium? Please come up and... I would, yeah, because that's on our agenda tonight. So, okay. Anybody online? Public comment for items not on our agenda? Somebody almost turned their camera on. Lindsay?
I do have two comments. I'm not going to be able to stay on for the whole meeting, so I was hoping to just say them and then pop off because I have to go pick up my son. Is that okay? They do relate to the agenda items, though.
Normally we don't do this, but can you make it quick or?
Yes.
Okay.
I have to go pick him up at baseball and my husband is out of town. So I appreciate that. My two things are just advocating for the Hubbard Park discussion. I wanted to get on and advocate that you guys wait for the Parks and Rec master plan to use that as an opportunity to figure out what you're going to do with the conservation of that land as opposed to conserving it ahead of the master plan execution, just because I think that there's a lot of things that can come to light through that and what we need as a city for the Parks and Rec department. So that was one item that I wanted to advocate for, just holding on that while the master plan goes through. And allow the Parks and Rec committee to really suss out that park through that process. And then as far as the ARPA funds that you guys are going to discuss, I am just going to advocate for the use of the Veterans Memorial proposal that you had put on the list. I have been meeting with people, and I did meet with Mike and Elizabeth at the Coffee of the Councilors and letting them know that I really want to reprioritize the parks in terms of our children, and the quality and maintenance of the fields has gone down significantly in the last 10 years. So I am advocating to use some of the ARPA funds for a capital project at Veterans Memorial. Those are my two comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
No other comments from the public or online? Okay. We're going to move on to councilors' announcements and reports on committee assignments, and then the city manager's report. Who did I start with last time? We'll start with Elizabeth.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Tim. We had our first coffee with a counselor at Chamberlain School, and we had 11 attendees from the public. The feedback was very positive. And we will be at Orchard School. Mike and I will be at Orchard School this Saturday at 9 o'clock. That session resulted in a subsequent invitation to attend Mayfair Park community meeting where we were able to listen to 30 additional residents of the city. So if that's any indication of community outreach, I think so far so good, but more to be seen. I also attended the annual South Burlington Land Trust meeting, which honored Sarah Dopp and her contributions to the city and conservation efforts. And our own Paul Connor had an opportunity to speak there and gave some just wonderful, warm comments about Sarah's many contributions to the city. And there were a couple other folks that also had a chance to honor her and recognize her work. So that was a really nice experience. I did attend the school board meeting as well and had a chance to re-listen to the Williston Road easement conversations for the bike path. And hopefully that will be moving forward soon. And then I had a chance today to walk the Hubbard Park area with my fellow counselor, Mr. Chalnick, and that was a good experience. I had not walked that area before, so that was nice to kind of get into that area a little bit more thoroughly. That's it.
Did you check for ticks when you were done?
I did.
We both wore long pants.
Andrew?
Sure. Well, thank you, Elizabeth. So Elizabeth and I had a great walk in Hubbard, and I also attended the Land Trust meeting. It was a very moving set of remarks for a remarkable woman. Sarah was a force of nature, and I will miss her dearly. I think the city will miss her dearly. I also attended an Economic Development Committee meeting. Most of the discussion focused around their request that we use some ARPA dollars to develop a plan. So initially, folks may recall their request was ARPA dollars for childcare. They submitted a letter to us a couple months ago changing that request, and we kind of spent a lot of time, fleshing that through and fleshing out the importance of having such a plan, what such a plan could bring to the city, and how that committee would best go about advocating for that plan really in front of the council. And I anticipate, or they kind of agreed that what they plan to do is come up with some talking points, a presentation, and come before us at some point in the near to medium term future to discuss that request more fully. I also, Susan Grasso from Local Motion and Nick Anderson and I from Bike Ped met at Elson Parkway and Williston Road, and we biked the new proposed kind of temporary Elson Park Greenway, I'll call it, which starts from that intersection, weaves through the Elson Parkway neighborhood, Prouty Parkway, O'Brien Drive to the middle school, high school complex, and we kind of noted where signs might go on the path and where there might be bump outs and where we might do some stenciling. And I'm really excited about that. I think that path is going to work really, really great. And Local Motion has been a terrific partner. They have a person on their staff that does design, that designs some wonderful signs, and that they're going to help printing and installing. So they've just been an amazing partner, and really excited about that.
Thank you, Andrew. Mike?
Yes. Okay. I attended the City Center Collaborative, which is, if some of you don't know, another organization that is about how to work with partners who are small businesses in the city center, but as well as anyone who's interested, as well as our new residents who will be moving in. And the good news was the first of those new residents moved in on the 13th of June, when we actually had our meeting to work together and to help bring sort of the dynamic go-to environment and atmosphere that I think we all have been waiting for when this vision was first set out. The next meeting, because it's basically open to anyone, you don't have to be in the city center. If you just want to be a part of this initiative, the next meeting is on July 18th at 9 a.m. here in City Hall. So I would encourage those who are excited about what's possible to come out. I also, as mentioned, attended the Chamberlain School coffee with counselors. It was a really great experience. It wasn't just listening to and hearing what people had to say, but it was an ability to go back and forth and clarify why they thought that, how those ideas had come about, and also even ask them about, what are the processes and best ways to help us to connect more. And as Elizabeth mentioned, the idea came out immediately from one of the players to one of the participants to attend the Mayfair tax district, fire district, which does call its dues taxes, because I found out that they're a municipality. It was a really, every day you learn something new about your community. But I think what that says is that, if there are other organizations, homeowners organizations, or co-ops, whatever, which would, welcome an opportunity to have a counselor visit them and hear them, one, two, whoever. I guess it can't be more than two. Otherwise, we'll have a city council meeting. I would urge people to, reach out to any of us. I also was not able to attend the bike and ped. My son had an award ceremony that evening, but I did get a good readout of that group. The good news, bad news is, the bad news was that, there'll be no penny for path projects completed in 2024. But the good news that was shared is, as they went over with the city with the CIP, is that if things proceed as planned, and one of them is the Hubbard Park path, it would start in the fall and be completed by spring of 2025. The Dorr Street path, there's still some land issues, but they're hopeful that construction on that last section could begin in 2025. And the Spear Street path, we're expected to start that process and construction maybe summer of 2026. It's always just around the corner, just around over the horizon, but now it's coming into focus. So that was very exciting to hear. And then I look forward tomorrow to attending. I reached out, connected with Chris Shaw, and I'll be attending tomorrow the CCRPC annual meeting. And again, that's about how do we work with our regional partners to maximize efficiencies. I mean, that will be the mindset I'll be going with. I think we've all talked about that to help us manage the budget challenges that are upon all of us. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Lori?
I'll start. I also attended the service or the gathering for Sarah Dopp, and was very moving, and she will be missed. That same evening, I also attended a gathering for Common Roots, who are trying to launch a new initiative, and there was a lot of very good energy there, so hopefully that will move forward. I did attend on the 10th Parks and Rec meeting, and there was some discussions about some of the ball field conditions, discussion about the master plan and how the committee interfaces with the plan being developed and whether they're proactively providing information, how that back and forth takes place so that they have good input into that study. And there was conversation about Hubbard Park fairly extensively, and that committee actually that evening voted unanimously to request that the council wait until after the master plan for the parks and open space is complete to conserve any land in the Hubbard Park. And that's just their view, is that who knows what will come out of the master plan that could influence how that conservation easement goes into place. They also talked about South Village and the property there that was originally going to be a soccer field or other development. And again, the discussion was that while they're ready to do something, that's also something that should be paralleled with the master plan, so that as we look at what we do with these different areas, we do it in accordance with what comes from the master plan. I also met on the 5th with the Natural Resource Council, Conservation, and an RFP, or the RFPs have gone out for the Parks and Open Space Master Plan and are supposed to be back on July 12th. So that is moving forward. And just let me take a look here quickly. They talked about committee reorganizations, and they had a meeting with Jesse and Paul and Alana, and staff and council focusing on mission. Advice to council how to give and what if it is ignored. So there was a question about how do we advocate, or are we just acting at the with what the council asked us to do, or are we actually advocating and bringing things forward? There was a discussion about the tree preservation ordinance that they've been working on. They have a draft which they're submitting to planning and zoning, to Paul. And there was a question as to whether the city council had approved for them to be doing that, or whether it was something that they have taken under their own initiative, whether they need approval from the council in order to move an initiative like that to the planning commission. So there was some lack of clarity there, and I think that speaks to the reorganization work that we're hoping to do around the committees. And the last thing that was talked about was, well, two other things. There was a conversation about possibly having the homegrown national parks find a home in their committee. They're looking into that and deciding whether or not it's something that they feel is appropriate. And they also thought that the CCRPC fund for restoration projects could potentially help fund that initiative if it's one that they take on. And the last thing was, there was discussion about mowing around the stormwater facilities and how often it happens and who does it, and is it happening too often? And what came back from staff basically is staff is evaluating. There's been a lot of turnover in the staff, so it's really hard to keep consistency and know who's doing what. They're trying to really look at this and work on it, see which ponds it's appropriate to only mow once, which one need to be mowed twice. And they've basically put forward that staff wants to have leeway moving forward, and they will do the best they can to do only one mowing where it's appropriate and to do two. They don't want to make specific commitments because there's a lot of moving parts that they're still dealing with, but it's something that they're definitely paying attention to. And in terms of Mike's going to Mayfair, I live in Queen City Park, which is also a fire district.
Looking forward to invite.
So they have a counselor whose ear is somewhat listening. But if others would like to join anytime, that's certainly an option. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Lori. In terms of mowing, Mike has his finger up.
If I could, one thing I forgot, I just want to make a pitch for the active transportation planning survey. The deadline is the 21st of June. We worked with the bike and ped to put up on Friday's front page form. So if anyone up here who hasn't done it, or anyone in the audience, or anyone online, it just really takes 5 minutes, and the more feedback we get, the more statistical accurate it is in terms of reflecting the views of the community. So sorry for the interruption, but please, just take 5 minutes, front page form Friday, and on all the pages you'll find it. Thank you.
Going back to mowing, interestingly enough, I ride my e-bike to work a couple times so far. Riding down a community drive next to Tech Park, I noticed that Tech Park is mostly meadow now, and they've mowed some walking paths through it with a little sign. And so I contacted Michael BM about that, and they're going to try to brush hog fewer times, because it doesn't make any sense. And right now, the meadow's up about this high, and it's gorgeous, just really beautiful. And the main reason is not to affect birds like the bobolinks, right? So they're very sensitive to that, and that's great. It's a change I think that just went in the last couple of years, so I'm really thankful for that. I just want to wish all the fathers a belated Happy Father's Day. So yesterday, if you didn't know, you probably did. I didn't get served breakfast in bed. That's okay, burnt toast and runny eggs. No. I attended a dogs space committee meeting, and unfortunately, they didn't have a quorum, so that ended fairly quickly. I also went to the planning commission meeting right afterwards, and I believe that they voted out the complete set of LDR changes for the EV charging and also some of the Act 47 changes. So that block came out, and I think that that's done now. That's a lot of work on staff.
Public hearing. They warned a public hearing. They warned a public hearing.
They did, okay, yeah. So that's really good news. A lot of work by staff and by the commission. I attended the opening of the art gallery display by the SB Schools District that's in the hallway. If you go down that hallway, you see a lot of fish. There's a lot of fish down that hallway. Beautiful works of art by our students, K through 12. Wonderful to see that work in the lobby. And there also was a transportation plan meeting here last week that I attended. I don't remember very much about that, but sorry. There was a meeting that we had with the SBBA that Andrew and Jess and I attended with Tom, talking about perceptions of paving issues around the city and why aren't we paving, this year. And I think that the council has published, and Tom DePietro has said, several times that because of the work that we're doing for the school on Dorset Street, they're going to delay that paving till next year. So then we'll have that paving plus other paving in the city. So we went around and talked about the condition of the pavement here and there. And, there's an issue of communication, I think, with the residents about what constitutes poor pavement, bad pavement, good pavement. And we kind of agreed on some of the streets that we thought were not the best streets. And it was a good discussion. And I'm glad we all met and had that. We had a leadership meeting today, Jesse and Chelsea and Violet here at City Hall. I was remote. And one of the issues that came up was the Williston Road streetscape work and the progressing easement agreement between the school and the city for the strip of land and any changes to the landscaping that have to happen there. So that's ongoing as well. I think that's all I have. Jesse?
Tim,
Oh, hold on.
I just have two more quick things to add. Late breaking news. I don't know who has seen it or not, but the Act 250 Act that was vetoed by the governor was overridden today by the Senate or by the legislature, as well as the tax.
The yield?
Yes,
The yield bill was
the yield was
for both houses?
was overruled by both houses. So the 13.8 will be for next year. So those two things have been reinstated by the legislature.
Did they get to the energy bill?
Yes.
Not that
Digger is
I had no idea.
saying it's also overridden.
That was also overridden by both houses?
Updated renewable energy standard to become law following override. And the safe injection. Yep.
Oh, they overrode the overdose prevention center bills?
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Yeah. Wow.
So they had a busy day today.
Yeah, I guess so. Thank you. Jesse?
Sure. Just a few follow up on. This is great. You guys are doing a lot of work. I like that I get to do clean up batter. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
So yes, yield and Act 250. Paul wanted me to share that with the LDR amendments that are now going to public hearing, we will be able to quickly respond to some of those smaller changes in that round of LDR cleanup that is coming out of the Act 250 bill. And the yield bill passing also does mean that we have a clear path to getting property tax bills out on time. When that is held back, it can create a challenge for municipalities, but it looks like we will not be facing that And then on the SBBA paving meeting, was a good conversation. I just want to make it very clear to the community, because I think one of the things that's got lost in translation is that funding that is in the budget this year to pave Dorset Street is not going away. It is rolling over to paving next year. So next year we will have the FY24 money and the FY25 money and potentially FY26 money as well. So it's not that just because the paving's not happening this year, the money is going away. It's staying in the CIP reserve fund that you all previously created. So a couple of other updates from me. So we have 2 meetings in July. July 1st, your primary task will be to set the tax rate, which is a very exciting thing you do every year, which is a math formula. You can't really change it, but you do have to set it. And then July 15th is our second meeting in July, and we will be proceeding regularly, but I will be remote that meeting. Just wanted to let you know. I want to mention Lindsay Getz referred to this in her public comment, but on your consent agenda is approval of an RFP to do investigation and research on the fields at Vet Park. This is something staff had put forward a couple of months ago. It is trying to address the challenges with maintaining those fields and looking to improvements in the future. These are engineering inspections and site inspections. We are hoping that is back in time to build into the FY26 budget. So heard and understood from the community, and we are looking at long-term sustainable solutions for that. And thank you to Tom and his team for putting that work together, and Silken, who is online tonight. Alana and Martha Machara and I met with the Vermont Economic Progress Council last week. We have a 2 times a year monitoring site visit for our TIF district. As you may know, VEPC's been going through a lot of staffing changes. So there's 2 staff that oversee the TIF district at the state level. They are both new to their positions, although they are not new to state government and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, which is great. They have some foundation in that. But it was really great to get to know them a little, to give them a tour of our TIF district and tell them the story of where we are. They had very positive, they had reviewed our state treasurer audit, had very positive things to say about the materials that Martha and Alana had submitted in advance of this monitoring site visit. I think I've shared this with the council, but just to share with the council and the community, in partnership with the library trustees chair, we are looking to review our memorandum of understanding between the city and the library. There's this new state statute that went into effect this session that outlines some changes to how libraries function in the state. So we want to update to integrate that, as well as just hasn't been looked at in over a decade. So we're looking at it now that we're co-located and some other staff things have changed. So finally, we are coming up to Adam and the Recreation and Parks, really busy season. Without an indoor recreation season or center, we try and squeeze as much into the summer as we possibly can when we can be outside. So just a reminder that SB Night Out starts this Thursday. Saturday is the camp out at Vet Memorial Park. And then July, Adam and his team are running a July fitness series. So every day, the month of July, there will be a different fitness activity at a different park throughout the city. So keep your eyes out for that. And then, of course, we are in Juneteenth week. So happy Juneteenth to the community. Adam and Jennifer in the library have put together 2 really interesting opportunities for the community to come together and celebrate and learn more about Juneteenth. So one is tomorrow night here at the library, sponsored by the UVM Health Network on it's called the Hair Equity Project, thinking about educating the community on how Black Americans sometimes have inequitable experiences in perceptions. And then, of course, on Juneteenth, on Wednesday, is the community celebration at Vet Park. It's kind of a pre-SB Night Out. There will be musicians and speakers and food trucks, and we really hope the community comes out and celebrates Juneteenth with us on Wednesday night. And with that, I will leave it there.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. There are 3, 6, 7 items. Consider and sign disbursements, approve minutes from the May 6th, 2024 City Council meeting, receive the May financial statements, approve the fiscal year 25 rental registry budget, approve resolution 2024-15, expanding the Sextons Committee. Approve appointments to the Planning Commission, Charter Committee, Development Review Board, Library Board of Trustees, Sextons Committee, and Pension Advisory Committee as presented. And authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Krebs in Lansing for design and construction services related to improvements at Veterans Memorial Park that you just mentioned. Right. So is the council okay with this full consent agenda?
I have two really quick questions about disbursements,
Sure.
just for my education. The first item is $25,000 for the Bed Bike Bridge easement to 89-2 Realty Company. And are they the Staples Plaza? Who are they?
Martha or Colin?
They're the plaza. Okay. And the other question I had, and again, this is just out of curiosity, is the CH parking lease. Where is the CH parking? Just so I.
So this is the City Hall parking lease. We lease parking spaces from the Poom property across the street
Okay.
to allow for staff and visitor parking to City Hall
So that's okay.
across the street.
That's all
Great.
I needed to know. Thank you. I assumed both of those, but I wanted clarity. Turning it off.
Tim, can I ask a clarification on the execution of the contract with Krebs and Lansing for design and construction services related to improvements at veterans? I asked a question about whether or not sort of cost value was considered in the selection criteria, and the feedback was it was more qualitative assessment. I believe there were sort of 5 criteria that were evaluated. And that the subsequent process, once the vendor was selected, was to negotiate the cost. I just have not had the experience before where cost versus the value delivered isn't a variable. So I just want to get a little bit more explanation there if I could.
Thanks, Tom.
Tom DePietro, Public Works Director. I'll jump in here, and Silken is online. She can help me out if you have specific details. But typically, we retain contractors in one of two ways. We put out a request for a proposal. We have a very specific project scope of work defined, and with those, we'll get not just refined scopes of work, but also cost proposals. In other cases, we do a request for qualifications. So we say these are the things we want to do up at the park. Firms respond, and we choose the most qualified one. From there, once we've determined who's the most qualified, we negotiate a contract and a price, and we would bring that back per the purchasing policy for approval, depending on amount. It could be approved by myself or Jesse, or come back to this board, depending on the total amount. So that's what we've done in this instance. We weren't familiar with folks that specialized in this internally or in the area, so we put a pretty wide net out to look at people who may have had this experience and got some good proposals back.
And when it says on here construction services, that doesn't literally mean supplying the construction services.
Typically,
it's really design.
Construction phase engineering services include bid and construction oversight. If I'm not exactly sure what piece,
okay.
but these wouldn't be the folks that actually would do construction that we're talking about now. This would help us make a plan to do better irrigation or drainage or a new field or something.
And
like that.
that was part of my thinking about not getting a cost, was that could be a significant difference in the total project. Thank you for that, Tom. Appreciate it.
So can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you. And now we're going to move on to the first reading of an ordinance to update the sewer and stormwater and possibly set a public hearing for August 5th, 2024 at 7 p.m. We have Mr. DePietro and Mr. Wheeler.
Okay. I can flip slides, Jesse, if
Sorry, Tom.
sorry for turning my computer on and disrupting the meeting earlier. So I'm going to do a very brief overview and then turn it over to Dave Wheeler our water resources engineer, and he's going to go through a brief presentation. But this follows up on the water ordinance discussion. Hopefully everyone recalls and is familiar with the extensive discussions we had about the water service area map. So there's also a sewer service area map that we are working to adopt, and that was the impetus behind this particular ordinance update. So since we were going into the ordinance anyway, we looked for other things that we could update, and Dave will talk about it, but one of the things we found is that we went from having just stormwater and sewer ordinance combined in one document for many years, since 2005. And then we have this new Muni code system. So our ordinances are nice and organized online, but the format's very different. And so as it got pulled in from that old PDF, we had to reformat just for it to make sense. Things were out of order. Definitions for stormwater were in the wastewater section. So you see a lot of red in there, I think, sometimes when you go through, especially on the stormwater side. But that's a lot of cutting and pasting and rearranging. You'll see the same blocks of text kind of shifted around. But anyway, with that little bit of intro, I'll turn it over to Dave to run through the presentation.
Thank you. Dave Wheeler, Water Resources Engineer. Yeah, Tom summed it up quite well. We're really here before you to establish the sewer service area map. And while we had the ordinance in review, we made some other changes, largely splitting apart the stormwater section from wastewater, and just bringing it, up to date. It was a little bit outdated. So it was established to, to set regulations for the operation and maintenance of our sewer system. There's some very old-timey language in there, which is kind of interesting, that addresses not only wastewater, but also garbage. So way back in the day when there was no proper sewage disposal, you had waste and garbage piling up in alleys and whatnot. And so that was all kind of, again, way back in the day, handled together. But this ordinance was updated last in 2021, so any major policy changes have been updated as we go. It should go. And yeah, there's a lot of language in there about fees as well. There we go. So the major changes, again, establishing the sewer service area, and then updates to billing. So there's a slide that talks about meters for wastewater only customers, and then allowing for a base rate, but not imposing one. Some clarifications on terminology when it comes to allocations, and adding the city center service area map as well. And then we have our new DPW standards. So we've pulled out a lot of old technical language and pointed it to our DPW standards. There's some very, very specific language in there about having, trucks with flashing lights on while you're digging a ditch. We pulled that kind of language out, and anything technical will now live in our DPW standards. We added language in for pump stations, just the type of pump stations that we will take over. We need them to be robust. And then again, separating out stormwater language. So the sewer service area map is very similar to the water service area map, which Paul has, talked in length about. The primary difference is that in the water service area map, areas above an elevation of 430 feet cannot be served by the water tank at its critical low elevation, whereas, we are able to provide sewage treatment to those areas because, it flows downhill. So, this map is to provide clear interpretation of Act 47.
And I'll just note, so this is no changes since May 20th. This is the same map you looked at when Paul was here, and he had the interactive thing on the screen, you kind of went in depth on.
So we thought about the section in the ordinance that addresses meters for wastewater only customers. So right now the ordinance requires meters for all customers. So that way we bill based off of flow. However, that's not how it works everywhere in the city. There are some special agreements that have been made over the years to allow for alternative billing methods, such as like number of bedrooms or sinks or other metrics like that. But that's not in the ordinance. So we could either update the ordinance to address these special cases, or we could, move forward with requiring the installation of meters for wastewater only customers. And to clarify, it would go on the water lines going into homes. So if they're on private water, it would go on those water lines to meter water use.
Oh, so if they have a private well, you would put a meter on the
Correct.
output from their well to judge what their sewer
Yes.
production would be.
Yep.
I see. That wasn't clear to me.
So-
This, I'm like going, they don't.
So this is not a
Is
change
it
to
going to be
the
a dry
ordinance.
meter just sitting there with, and they're just going to pay the meter fee? So thank you for the clarification.
Yep. And again, not a change to the ordinance, so it'd just be enforcing an existing one.
I have two questions on this for you, Dave. The first one is, these meters will be water meters, so, and I'm thinking about Fire District number 1, which from your numbers appears to be the majority of the residents that don't have meters. These meters will be metering the water that's used, so if the Fire District chose to, they could use them for billing for their water. Is that correct?
I'll jump in on that. Yeah. So to Councilor Smith's point, so there's about 120 properties that are wastewater only, as we call them, that don't have meters installed, and 77 of them are down in Queen City Park or Fire District 1. So these would be just like all the other meters we've replaced in the city, where there'll be the radio read meters. And so how that information gets shared could be something we could talk about.
Okay.
But typically our water department would just go and read them with the radio meters, and they'd get integrated into the system.
Okay, the second question I have is, I know that the installation of these meters is the responsibility of the homeowner, and what is so I can just report back to the fire district, what is the timeline for requiring this? Do you know?
So I don't believe we wrote something into the ordinance, but that is something we thought we might talk with council about this evening, on if we were to move forward and enforce the ordinance as written, as we're proposing. Kind of what would those letters say? What kind of timeline should we provide people to kind of come into compliance with that? Because it's not been a thing the city's enforced, obviously, historically. So,
And is it correct that the approximate cost per meter is about $1,000 to the resident?
at the last quote I got from our water superintendent, it was just under that.
Okay. So, just so residents have a chance to absorb the idea, know what the timeline is for when you'll do it, and obviously when you do it, they need to come into compliance. So thank you.
Are you saying that you don't have water meters in Queen City Park?
We have no water meters in Queen City Park.
You don't have any water.
We do have
You
water.
do have water, but it's
We-
from your own fire district.
We have our own fire district well, deep well, and we provide all the water to our own residents.
So are your water bills commensurate with the rest of the city's water bills?
Well, we just are finishing an asset management plan, which may have a big impact on what our bills are and
Okay.
what our decisions are going forward. So
More
some
to
of
come?
that's in question, but there's a lot of people in Queen City Park that are very attached to their well water.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
Can I just jump in?
Everybody's
So-
on city wastewater. There's actually 3 pump stations down in Queen City Park that bring that wastewater up to the Bartlett Bay plant, and they're quite old. So one of our bond votes was some funding to help upgrade and replace all those. So
So, I mean, $1,000 is not a trivial amount to come into compliance. And I guess I'm just wondering, do we think so I understand it's not codified what we're doing, but is it kind of working? And should we codify it? I mean, like the existing system of billing the folks that are wastewater only, how's it working?
So it's currently the way we do it for these folks, based on an agreement that a prior city manager had put out. It's based on the number of bedrooms. So I want to say it's 2003, 2005. The city had sent out letters. Our water superintendent went out, did some inspections, determined the number of bedrooms, and that's what billing's been set at. And so, if it's 1, 2, 3 bedroom, there's an increasing cost as it goes up. Andrew, we've not been back into houses to check and count bedrooms in almost 2 decades. So that would be something certainly we'd want to talk about, because I know there's been a lot of kind of renovation down in that area, certainly, and other places. So that's something we'd want to look at. But it is generally working. It's just not in the ordinance.
No, I understand. I mean, is there a way maybe to kind of, if we were to, say, codify this alternate path, to sense check it against, say, all the water that we know Queen City Park uses, to see, well, are we kind of getting it about right? You know, if we can kind of sense check it against the water usage, maybe we can save those residents having to install a meter for every property.
So we actually think there'll be a payback period for residents. We think their water bills or wastewater bills will be lower. So over time, there should be a payback period for that.
I'll throw one other thing in, which Dave talked about at the NRCC meeting. Metering encourages conservation. Right now, we have no metering. People can use, they can leave their tap on all day long if they want, and if it's going down the sewer drain, it's going to the wastewater treatment plant. So it is an expense, but in terms of equity and in terms of conservation, though I don't want to spend the money, and I know there are people who have concerns, and I don't know if perhaps there would be a way for the expense to be paid over time through the stormwater bill over X number of payments, and that's something that could be discussed maybe. But I do think it has a lot of merit.
So your perspective, it can not only help the city bill sue more accurately, but help the fire district as well get the use of water itself under better control.
And help the stormwater district in that if I'm charged for sewer fees based on how much water I use, if I use less water, my sewer fees go down. So there's a lot of incentive to conserve.
Well, is there a meter on the outflow from the main fire district well to the whole neighborhood?
Yes.
Yes, we have very, very accurate records on what's used every month and every day. So
Okay. So that at least give you a feeling for the normalized usage per house, per bedroom, or whatever, or by square foot, whatever it might be, and whether that's normal or whether it seems larger than normal.
typically we're coming in under what the average is for per bedroom use. So
Tom, is the of the balance of the 50 properties that aren't covered in Queen City Park, is there another one or two dense areas within the city?
No, they're sort of spread out. And within that, actually, as I'm looking at, I went to grab my little data sheet here because I thought we might get into this. A couple of those are in Burlington, and we actually get water readings from the city of Burlington, so we can bill them for wastewater. So there's about 20 in there that are in that situation. And then the handful are just around the city. I couldn't tell you the history of them. They're sort of spread out.
In Eastwood's neighborhood that has that Burlington?
Wherever our kind of borders are, where Burlington has pipes, their water pipes coming in. So kind of Route 7, Proctor area. I know there's a number of them right there.
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
sorry for the delay.
Let's see. So we've also added a base rate option, but we've established it.
Can I jump in just one more
Yep.
second? One question didn't get answered, which is when will we know how this is moving forward? Is that something the council's going to decide?
Yes. So this will be a first reading, and then we'll do a second reading. And again, nothing's actually changing in that section. I'm just bringing it to everybody's attention that we would then take action to send letters to those property owners to say, we're going to be enforcing the ordinance. We discussed it with council on such and such evenings. This is the time frame, call the water department for other technical assistance or something of that nature.
So your recommendation as it's listed is to keep the ordinance the way it is.
Right.
So I can report back to the fire district that unless council does something different, this is coming down the road.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So yes, adding a base rate. We've just included the language that allows you the mechanism to put in a base rate, but it's set at $0. So you could choose to change that at some point in the future. There was a rate study done that does not recommend a base rate due to an intermunicipal agreement with Colchester, so they would be treated as a single customer. So if there's a base rate, they would pay like one base rate unit, which would make it unfair. city center service area map. So there already was language in the sewer ordinance for the city center service area, but we just established the boundary of that, adding this map consistent with the water ordinance. And part of that has to do with the new town center designation. Allocation requirements. So we've kind of streamlined it a little bit. So smaller projects under 1,000 gallons per day, they're only required to get a final allocation instead of preliminary then final. There was kind of vague language in there about a sewer permit, and we've kind of clarified whether that's allocation versus connection fees. And we've added a definition for allocation fees as well. We added language specifying situations where properties are vacant for 3 years, then their allocation returns to 0. And then made it clear that the allocation runs with the land and not with the owner. So you can't buy up land and then take that allocation.
So could I clarify again the issue of no new connections? Do all the properties that, if they had a failed system, for instance, and need to connect, are they covered within the sewer service area map?
So the way we've written it is if you have your own on-site septic, which is permitted by the state of Vermont, and your system fails, going forward, once this is approved, if you were within the sewer service area, you would have to connect. If you were outside, you would check with us. Basically, we would just confirm you're outside and look at a few things, and then we'd say, okay, and you'd move forward and have a replacement system, probably an in-ground system permitted by the state of Vermont.
Okay, thank you.
That begs an important question. I'm thinking about ways that could be abused. So if somebody, depending upon what the zoning is, right, if they were nearby and they had a septic and they said that it failed and they wanted to connect, and then they tore down their house and built, 5 houses, right? Would they still be allowed to do that if that zoning was allowed there?
So they would still need a new allocation for the increased amount. So they'd still have to come through that process. They'd probably have to have a different connection as well, a larger pipe for 5 houses instead of 1. So we'd have them in both those processes as well as whatever zoning process they'd have to go through.
And then miscellaneous updates. So again, just separating out stormwater and sewer into different articles that required separating out definitions and copying over the penalties and waiver fees. We also updated the dollar values in the penalties and waiver fees to match all the other ordinances, updated some job titles and other outdated language, and added references to the DPW standards. So that is it for wastewater. One more thing. So in the future, we will be back based off of the results of the industrial user survey. So that's still ongoing. We're doing a robust survey to understand the characteristics of the industrial wastewater being sent to South Burlington's wastewater treatment facilities. Based off of those findings, we may recommend new limits for different chemicals or pollutants, things like that. So that will come with a whole new section added in.
But you must have existing rules that say thou shalt not pour certain things down the sewer drain, right? If you are for anybody, right? But especially for commercial users, right?
So we do. But this industrial user survey is sort of a push that started at the state level that has come down now. So we're trying to figure out who's connected to our system, what they're discharging, and then prepare ourselves for future growth. So let's say breweries are, I guess, the big example here, right? Let's say 2 breweries were suddenly to come in the Airport Parkway sewer shed. They could very easily overload kind of with a BOD or an oxygen demand or whatever else might be in that high strength waste, right? That's not equivalent at all to a normal residential user. So it's to sort of protect ourselves and our plant from that and sort of maintain that capacity without getting too deep into it, because consultants only halfway through this at best. There may be a billing paradigm there as well, so that if folks are sending us high strength waste and they're not pre-treating it to sort of knock that BOD down, we might charge them more. So we do have an agreement in one case, but we don't have a lot of breweries or anything of that nature in the city at the moment, but we're preparing ourselves for potential of whoever might come, and so really clarifying that.
And do you have the ability to test for some chemicals that you would not like to have in the sewage at all on a regular basis?
So we can require dischargers to do monitoring. We could potentially do our own monitoring, but the ordinance as it's written now and will go forward says we can require them to do monitoring if we have certain concerns. So this is like this in user survey, sort of a self-reporting thing right now.
Right.
Yeah, to get a handle on it.
Thanks.
Okay, and
Yeah, we're going to hand it over to Marisa to talk about stormwater. So if you don't have any more questions about wastewater, thank you.
Hello. Marisa Rorba, Stormwater Superintendent with the city. And yeah, I guess we'll just get right into the Stormwater Ordinance.
Can you pull your mic a little closer, please?
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. So our Stormwater Ordinance, as we can see on the slide, establishes the regulations for how we manage and operate our stormwater system. It provides guidelines for the state stormwater permit coverage, user fees, and enforcement, and it was added to the wastewater ordinance in 2005. I believe it was just the easiest way to do it at that time, and as everybody has been saying now, we are separating it out because it is easier for it to live in a separate article within the Muni Code, and this way we don't have to bring both ordinances to you if we need to change something in one or the other.
just doing the pause thing again. There we go. Hopefully that was one slide.
All right. So Dave already covered that first section there. The big thing that we had to change in our stormwater ordinance is that we had to change how we are going to calculate our billing, essentially. The fee basis calculation was established by state law in Bill S310 on May 30th of this year, and it comes into effect on July 1st of this year. And what that requires is the use of an average instead of a median to calculate our ERU, which is the basis for all of our stormwater billing across the city. We're not entirely sure why that happened, but it does now put us in the position of having to reassess all of the impervious in the city and come up with an average number for the impervious for a single family residence. So it is a big change as far as what we are going to have to do to come into compliance with that new state law.
Can you just define ERU?
Oh, sorry, yes, equivalent residential unit. That is the basis for all of our stormwater billing. Each single family residence or each single family residential property is allocated one ERU. Currently that stands at 2,700 square feet. And then commercial and non-single family residential properties are assigned a rate based on the amount of impervious that is on their parcel. And there's a whole formula, and then they're assigned a number of ERUs. And the rates that council approves every year is our ERU billing rate for a single ERU.
So what's changing from average to median exactly?
So currently in our ordinance and the way we have done our ERUs in the past is we've taken the median amount of impervious surface on a single family residential property in the city of South Burlington. Oh. Yes. Okay. And now the state law is saying we have to do it as an average instead of a median. And since this hasn't been the amount of impervious on single family residential properties has not been assessed in a while, it is going to require that we go in and do, it's going to be a GIS exercise, but calculate the amount of impervious on every single family residential property within the city.
So it's roof and driveway mostly?
Mostly, yeah. Basically anything that water runs off of.
How did you do it when it was average?
So this goes back to when we started the utility. We collected the impervious data for citywide, right? And then we sorted out only the single family residential. We got the median value, right, for the however many thousands of properties that was.
Well, how did you measure it though? With
satellite imagery. and then it
With what?
satellite imagery that
okay.
pulls out different bandwidths of light,
works,
and there's
yep.
a calculation that happens in the background, and it is very accurate to tell you kind of even what's a roof or a road.
Yeah. Sounds like AI could do that today, right?
Yes, yeah.
Maybe.
But we still have to get the data, so yeah, we'll certainly be looking into that because this wasn't a task we expected to take on in the near future.
So I should
until
immediately
this.
go up and paint my roof like green or something like that? Would that help? If
See, yeah, we also use
A
LiDAR,
lot of
so the
moss
elevation.
on top of it.
Good.
I mean, if it soaks up the water.
Make holes in it so that it's not impervious.
The water doesn't run off of it.
Was it all second?
And then, yeah, we just updated a couple of references because that S310 also just moved things around within current law 24 VSA, and we updated a little bit of language to reflect minor language changes in the new 2023 MS4 permit.
Yeah. So that's our overview presentation. If council has other questions or thoughts, we're happy to receive them. And then kind of similar to we did the water ordinance a few weeks ago, right? You can choose to move this to a second reading. I believe there was some motion language in the memo that was attached to all this, if I remember correctly.
I have a question. So the state keeps changing the stormwater, permit language law over time, making it more and more strict, I guess you would say that, right? Which then puts certain HOAs out of compliance, right?
Yes.
Which then drives them having to get a new permit and maybe update some stormwater facilities with whatever that might be, right? And we've seen this happen around the city over the last, 15 years, right? Some really older HOAs just had to come, they weren't in compliance with anything and they had to do something different, right? And there were some assessments made. And then you take a look at Dorset Park, Dorset Park, the condo, and they did extensive work on those ponds, right, by putting down rocks in there and I think working on the dam too. So the question is, do these changes somehow make it easier for your utility to work with the homeowners, the HOAs, to make them aware of what's going to happen in the future? Because I'm assuming that as the state keeps upping the ante, you're going to have more of these HOAs, so to speak, underwater, and then they've got to float up and then make changes, right? And I'm just curious how that's going to work.
Nothing that we're proposing here changes any current policy that we have. But you're right in your description, I guess, Tim, is what I would say. So the old, the developments that were built in the 80s or 90s, they were required to bring it up to the newer standard or the current standard before the city will take over responsibility going forward. And in this case, I'm talking about like exclusively residential development. But what has happened recently is the state upgraded their technical standards for stormwater treatment, largely due to the phosphorus TMDL. So they said, okay, you can't put in wet ponds anymore because those don't have as good phosphorus removal as a treatment wetland. So now there's a tier-based system and it gets a little confusing. But so that's sort of what we've been implementing and kind of reacting to that change at the state level. Is we don't want to take over like a wet pond perhaps that would then be required to be upgraded to a treatment wetland in a couple of years because this doesn't meet the current standard. So it's sort of our standard hasn't really changed. It's the standards that we use. It's the state standard there. Yeah.
And this leaves in place the change that we made a few years ago where if there's a change that's needed to be made and the city works with an HOA and there's a grant that's applied for and received, that the bulk of that grant will be applied to the city's expenses, the stormwater utilities expenses first, and leftovers will then go to the HOA. Is that true?
Yeah, that language was left in the ordinance.
Okay.
It wasn't touched.
All right, just wondering. Thanks.
I feel ready to move towards a motion to approve.
Before we do that, just similar to the water service area map, subsequent to that motion, I'd like to move that we ask the planning commission to also look at this. Well, ask the planning commission to also look at the sewer map, given the relation of that map to zoning.
So you want part of the motion to include to direct the planning commission to look at that map?
Or we can make it a separate motion. I just wanted to put that on the table.
Yeah, let's make that a separate motion. So do we have a motion?
I can make a motion. I got it
Go
right
ahead.
here. I move to pass the proposed amendments to the South Burlington Sanitary Sewer and Stormwater Ordinance at the first reading and warn said amendments for second reading and public hearing on August 5th, 2024 at 7 p.m.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you.
And I'd like to move to ask the planning commission to review the sewer service area map in connection with their review of the water service area map that we asked them to review a couple of sessions ago.
Discussion?
We have a motion and a second.
Do you have a second?
Did you second it?
No, I was going
I'm
to
sorry.
go for discussion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it and then I'll go for discussion.
Okay. So now we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
There is. If we approve your motion and the planning commission comes back and says they have changes, then we will need to have a third public hearing. Is that correct?
We would need to have another hearing for the new map, similar to the water map. So, right, Laura, you weren't in attendance when we discussed this. So and Paul, you correct me if I'm wrong, the map, as it is, the water map and the sewer map are, I think, placeholders pending a discussion of moving some of the NRP lines around in any event. So there'll have to be a new map. And the planning commission may have other changes they suggest to the maps.
Okay. The second question I have is, it was my understanding from the presentation that the stormwater map is essentially an overlay of the water service map. Is that correct?
It's the wastewater service area map, and it is it's matched up, except the water service area excludes those high elevation areas over 430 feet for other reasons. Yeah.
Thank you. So,
Okay. Paul, please.
Paul Connor, Director of Planning and Zoning. Just as a clarification, the motion on the water ordinance review for the Planning Commission was on possible additional adjustments to the water service area after the adoption of this set. So to look at areas that might be city parks or other conservation areas. So not as adjustments in the process of this set of amendments. So it would be work plan item for the fall. Okay.
So do we want to do the same thing with this motion so that it's
You want to
not before this, but
you want to amend
after?
that motion?
If it wasn't clear, I amend the motion to reflect Paul's comments.
Okay.
Okay.
So you already seconded.
With that said, I'll stick with
Alright.
my second.
And I have
So-
a comment.
Please.
I think it was the same comment that I made with the consideration of the water service area, which is the council directing the planning commission under statutory requirements, and also not knowing their workload now is pretty intense because we're still awaiting some of the work on the updates to the LDRs. So it was, if it's something that's sort of in the future and the work will get prioritized at some point, that's not the issue from my standpoint, but it is sort of a separation of the role of planning commission and city council.
Thank you. Ready for the vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? Opposed?
I'll oppose.
Sweet. You were, I didn't hear your vote.
I'm opposed.
You're opposed. So we have two opposed. So, okay. So it's 3-2. Motion carries. Thank you. Sorry. Discussion by the council on next steps related to Hubbard Recreation and Natural Area permit, conservation easement, and provide direction or request additional information from staff. Asking Erica Quallen to come up, and Jared Pellerin, and Adam Math.
So I'll do a little table setting while the team is coming up. And really this agenda item is meant for your discussion. So at the council's last discussion, back last July, there was a request that we look into exploring a permanent conservation easement on Hubbard. We have done that. We have a partner who we think would be willing to work with us on that. And so the conversation for the council is now, what specifically would you like us to explore? Areas of the park, the whole park, what's an allowable use, what's not an allowable use. Give us some directions about what you would like to see a future permanent conservation easement come back as. And the team is here to listen because they're the ones who will do the work.
I have a quick process question. When something is put on our agenda as for discussion, if we want to do a motion, does that have to happen at another warned meeting, or can discussion things become motions?
So how I would interpret that in this particular case is that we are looking for your direction. So if it's easier for you all to give us direction based on a motion, you are welcome to do that. It wouldn't be finalizing any future agreement.
Okay.
So any motion you would give us tonight, I move to permanently conserve the entire parcel, you would vote on that, means we go back and work with the team to develop a legal document that says that, and then warn that for action at a future date.
Okay, thank you.
So basically a non-binding guidance.
So I think that we should start the discussion off with, I mean, maybe each counselor would like to express what their hopes and dreams are for that park area. I mean, I can go first if you'd like. And I'll just be honest, that parcel is it is a gem in the city. I believe it has some very old forest area, older than other parts of the county, or some of the oldest in the county. And it has a wonderful meadow. It's adjacent and part of the Great Swamp. We also have, I think, the council has an agreement to put a paved bike path from north to south on it to connect to South Point, to connect to South Village, eventually over the Long property. I personally, I've got to make sure that bike path comes to fruition. And I personally would like to see everything east of that bike path to some degree conserved. When you move to the west, we have these incredible views of the lake, and we have some acreage that's being used by common routes. I'd like to see that continued, but I think that there are some areas, between that bike path proposal and the west where there definitely are, even if the bike path is created, there are some resting areas that are not going to be ADA compliant if they're left as they are today. And I've said this before in previous meetings. I think there's opportunity there to give the public some passive recreation, and I don't know what the future holds for other types of recreation when we're gone, right? So I personally would love to see the bulk of the property to the east of the bike path conserved, including all the forest and any of the Great Swamp area. But when you're talking about the west, I think that we need to think very carefully before we restrict ourselves severely on that parcel. That's all I have right now.
So I'm in many ways aligned with your thinking on it, Tim. I was part of the meeting with the Vermont Land Trust, and it became very clear in that meeting that there are many, many ways that a conservation easement can be structured, and there can be different levels of restriction on different parts of a parcel. The wooded area with the really old oaks that they were saying are probably in excess of 400 years old are some of the oldest trees, I think they were saying, in the state, not just here. It's a pretty exceptional piece of land. And the east side of the meadow is largely wetland, and it's already going to be conserved based on our LDRs. So we can't put a building or a ball field there because they are restricted access lands. So I think that it makes sense to conserve and protect that. And I think there are some questions about what could happen west of the bike path. So I'm somewhat in alignment with your assessment.
Yeah, no question. It's a beautiful piece of land, uniquely situated. And I think along those lines, I would also agree, Tim, that it's the city's land and it's for all our citizens and residents, and therefore ensuring that people can have access to that view, have reasons to come there if they are not in a position to walk, as I think a lot of us have done, often into the woods and see that. They should also have benefits. So I would also see sort of this dividing line between how it's used east and west. And I think that also aligns itself with, I read the master plan that was in 218. I'm not really sure how it evolved subsequently because I didn't see any documentation. But that seemed to be more in the spirit of the findings that came from the public that wanted to also see use, whether it is an area with someone who has limited mobility can also move forward and sit in areas and enjoying it. I think even a sort of a jungle gym or something at the beginning or close to that allow people with toddlers who can maybe wander off into the woods but can come there and have reason to come there and enjoy it. And also, I think very important is that, if we look at this, it's not just that space there, but how it is connected to the rest of the city. Because I think, those of people who, and I'm one of them who don't live far from that area, that's sort of a built-in advantage. But whatever we have there should have, maximum usage for different people have different sort of capabilities or abilities or mobility, or also just different ages, as well as being sure that access, whether it is by car, ideally by bike or walking, are very much integrated to the city. So I think we have to strike this balance, and I think that's in keeping with at least what I saw was the last sort of broad document, which was the 218 sounding of the public.
Thanks, Mike. Andrew?
So, I certainly agree that all the areas to the west of the path, including the meadow and the forest, should be conserved. With respect to the areas to the to the east, with respect to the areas to the west of the path, so my take from the meeting we had with the prospective partner was that they would be open to holding an easement on the areas to the west of the path and allow something on the other area. But yeah, I'm flipping back and forth. I'm sorry. The piece, to the west, they'd be open for something on the west, but it would have to be kind of in keeping with the conservation ethos. So it would have to be passive recreation. I don't think they would be happy with an event barn, bathroom facilities, 100 car parking lot, and I wouldn't be happy with that either. So I would certainly be open to thinking about what uses would be consistent with thinking of that as a natural area and a conserved area west of the path. But from my perspective, it would be useful to kind of spell those out in the easement so we know what we're talking about.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I have struggled. First of all, it's a beautiful property. I had a chance to walk it today, and I have struggled to reconcile the original public vision that started in 2015 with what moved into 2018, and then there was I know I was directed to minutes in the taped meeting. What I wasn't directed to was actually an update from a consulting firm that showed some revised elements in 2021. So I'm still trying to reconcile the public's vision for the property where there were 6 acres identified, and there were certainly some elements that I could understand over time because of the additional support that would be required there that didn't make it into the final city council motion in 2023. But there were also some elements, and as Andrew said, maybe they can be incorporated into a subsequent conversation with a land trust partner, but a play structure similar to what's in City Park that's really natural materials and would encourage young families with children to be there. Accessibility is certainly an issue. There's nothing mentioned in the motion around stormwater facilities, and I don't know if that has changed or not. So I personally see an opportunity for conservation, but I feel I wouldn't be comfortable voting on that if we had action warned today without fully understanding that reconciliation. And there may be people here who couldn't respond to that. The other element I wondered was not knowing what is going to happen 10 or 20 or 30 years down the road. Do we want to retain some flexibility? And I don't know what the legal alternatives are for that. But I know I asked the question about whether the notion of a temporary easement existed. So from my standpoint, it's certainly a parcel that is worth preserving in terms of both recreation and natural conservation. I do think some of the questions that were brought up earlier around maybe postponing making a specific recommendation on a permanent easement until the Park and Rec master plan is presented may be the wiser option in the short term, so that we understand the full picture. So that's kind of where I stand right now. But certainly the comments folks have made around conservation of the large part of that area. Again, it's western area. Yeah, I'm really bad at that. East, west makes, yeah, that's the wrong direction. East makes perfect sense to me. Thank you.
Well, let me ask this question. When do we think that the Parks Master Plan will be completed and available and that will be discussed by City Council?
So the plan is for 2025, like late 2025.
Okay. Sure.
Another question and a comment. The question I have, and this is, I don't know if it's for Jesse or for Tim or who it's for. The genesis of this piece of property from acquisition to the vote that was taken last year. I know there were a lot of different proposals that came forward. Were there any actual votes taken on action for Hubbard Park prior to the one that happened last year on 2023? Or was it all discussion prior to that time?
None that since I joined in 2016 that I know of.
Okay. The reason I'm asking that question is it's my understanding that a vote was actually taken in 2023 by the council that stated how to move forward. And while we may have some differing of opinions with the previous council, I think that it's a rare time that I would want to undermine a codified vote that's already been made by a previous council. So I just want to put that out there.
I think the spirit of that vote was there was a lot of discussion about, the bike path, whether it would be, SurePack, whether it would be paved, what Public Works, how they could best maintain it, in the winter weather. And it just made sense that, and there was opposition to putting that impervious surface in that area. But the council realized that was the best path forward for that particular project, so we voted on a paved path to go from north to south.
My recollection from that vote was that there was also a vote unanimously to move forward with a conservation easement on the whole parcel.
I don't recall.
I believe that if we go back to the minutes, that's what happened.
I just don't remember that part.
But the other thing that I want to mention is meeting with the potential partner, and talking to the Parks and Recreation Committee. While they were saying they encourage us to wait on any encumbrance until after the master plan is done, they did say very clearly that getting information, moving forward, getting things in line so we know what we could do, is something that they're not opposed to. So if we were to make a motion to say, let's move forward with our partners to find out what we can lay out in terms of east and west and what this might look like in preparation for potentially doing that. That would not be in opposition to what the Parks and Rec Committee was recommending, and it might enable this to be a 3-year or 5-year instead of a 20-year project. So I just want to put those two things out there as options.
Yeah, and Laura, if I could clarify, my reservations are not intended to undermine any prior council motion or vote. The July 17th meeting that was held in 2023 was largely focused on a bike path discussion. So given that the public was engaged in 2015 and 2018, and a council vote was taken in 2023, which was a significant change in how the conversation started, which again, that's not unusual. I feel like, taking a pause and re-engaging with the community on this is the vote that was taken, and there is a master plan in place that's in development for park and recreation. So here's the big picture, to sort of re-engage the community on the full picture of what the intent is. I don't consider that any kind of undermining of what the intent of that July 2023 vote was at all.
I'll just throw back, because I was at that 2023 meeting and I have a pretty clear memory of it. And there was a lot of focus on the path, but towards the end of the meeting, after that was done, there was also discussion and a very clear vote on conservation easement. So there was primary conversation here, but the conservation easement vote was a pretty clear vote from my recollection.
Can I just jump in, because the council has adopted minutes that reflect what it is, and so the minutes say, and this, if for those in the room probably remember, there was a long conversation and I really pushed to get definition around what folks were looking for exactly this reason. It says pursue what it would take to conserve the rest of the park after other laundry list of other improvements. So that I think you are both saying things that could fit in within that phrase. So I think wordsmithing that may not be effective. It wasn't to permanently conserve. It was suggesting that we would conserve the rest, but to pursue what it would take.
Might want to run the tape on that again, but in any event, but there's kind of two, I think, discussions going on. One is the easement, and it feels like most of us are aligned with how that should look going forward. But the second is kind of the plan. And one thing, Elizabeth, I think that's just important to understand, for public to understand, that during that July 17th meeting and the meeting before it, there was fulsome and voluminous public comment from hundreds of residents, and the council listened to all that. The public had an opportunity to comment extensively, and after listening to all that comment, really all over the spectrum, the council unanimously agreed on a particular path forward, a particular plan, and I would be very loath to reopen that piece of the discussion.
I think some members of the public would like to speak, maybe? Do you want to wait until?
I was just going to add that, I don't think it has to be either or. I mean, I generally think that we can use the next time frame that we are going forward with the master plan, as well as if you want to have discussions, as you suggested, without any commitments, basically allows us to get to a holistic picture. And at that point, because it is about not just this piece of land, it is about what are the activities and options we as a community from one end to the other will have. And it has to be perceived as balanced. It has to be perceived as fair. I think that anytime one rushes, one opens themselves up to criticism, and probably fairly so, that you didn't listen to me. You could always say, well, you weren't there, you didn't comment, but this is a unique piece of land, it's a very, in one way, a very permanent decision if we go down that route, and it only seems correct that we basically have a very broad discussion. We make the decision not just about this issue, but the broader recreational and open and passive and active activities that we have, and have we struck a balance that accommodates the most. You know, the goal is to maximize the good for the most, and I think this is a way to do it over the, you know, especially if we're talking, as you say, a 3 to 5 year time horizon. I don't think anyone wants an exercise that goes on for 10, 15 years.
But Mike, you agree that the meadow and the woods should have an easement on it?
I think that if we look at the holistic plan, and it depends on what we do with the to the
East.
west,
East.
so that what we do with what's to the
To
west,
yeah.
and therefore basically creates greater possibilities for
Right.
that. Though in general, I have I'll be honest. In general, I just find it interesting where one ties up. You know, the city, we can still have that if the city controls it. It is the city's park, and if the city basically takes that decision. So, you know, that this is how we will use everything to the east, but to the west we'll use it differently. But I think if we're going to try to get people to come along to an easement, and again, I think there needs to be a high level of comfort that there's sense of equity in taking care of it in the city. I'm fully for conserving it to the east. It is, you know, I've walked through there, I've taken my family, but I would also like to come up there and to the west to have somewhere where I can unlock my bike, or I can have a picnic, or I can invite people over. So I think there has to be balance. And I think if we have a discussion, an inclusive discussion, and we talk it through step by steps, and we look at it not just in terms of this particular property, but the whole active and passive recreation throughout the city, I think eventually we will come to a comfort level that maximizes the sort of buy-in by the whole city, whatever that final decision is.
Okay, thanks. Michael, did you want to say something? And don't forget to turn on the green light on the microphone.
The green light is on.
And please identify yourself.
Michael Mittag. I'm a resident of South Burlington since 2001, and I'm a member of the South Burlington Land Trust, and I'm a planning commissioner. We're not rushing, Mike. We are today where we were almost a year ago. On the 17th of July, we will be where we were on the 17th of July in 2023. That's almost a year when nothing has happened. And I have to correct you, Jesse. That is not the language of the motion. The motion was made by Councilor Emery, and it was moved to give authority to the staff to go forward with the design with benches, a mowed adjacent path to the paved path, no viewing or art installations, low lighting, which was intended for the parking space if necessary by state statute, parking for 18 vehicles, vegetation to shield homes from car lights if necessary, and having staff look into a potential conservation easement. And I'm not finished.
I was going to say you are right to correct
That's
me.
okay. That's okay. I wouldn't have said all that if I thought I was wrong.
But I think that actually is diluting of the point I was making.
No, those were the comments of Councillor Reilly. She summarized the discussion, and among them was pursue what it would take to conserve the rest of the park. There were hundreds of people, residents of South Burlington, who delivered input on this issue, on the conservation of the Hubbard Recreation and Natural Area. And the consensus was, we'll accept the path. There was a lot of opposition to a paved path because it was impervious and all the rest
There
of it.
was also a lot of support for the path as well.
In the end, that was accepted with a mowed path adjacent for walkers, but the shared use path would be for bikes, wheelchairs, walkers, whatever. And there was nothing else. The rest was to be left in its natural state for passive recreation, walking, bird watching, skiing, lying in the grass, getting bitten by ticks, whatever you want. But that was it. And I'm stunned that nothing has happened in a year. I'm absolutely flabbergasted. Some of you know that I ran a small tech company with 600 odd employees. If I'd given them that and they came back a year later with nothing done, they had to get out without letting the door hit their bums on the way out. This is not, it's partly the council's fault. You didn't tell Jesse you want it done by such and such a date. That's vague. But nevertheless, it's reasonable to assume that a year later, as Erica has written in the last paragraph of her memo, a year later we are where we were a year ago. I mean, that's just unacceptable. Particularly for the hundreds of people who came here and spent time and wrote to you and made a petition. I've never seen so much public engagement as there was about this issue.
Let me counter you, Mike, for a second. I mean, has that inaction done any harm to the park whatsoever in the year? Has any harm been done to the park?
The harm is coming from you now because you want to pull up the plant and look at the roots and then put it back and hope it'll grow again.
I'm not following that at all. You
made a decision. Now you want to fiddle with the decision. Maybe we should wait until in 2025 until the Parks Master Plan is ready.
Having discussion about that right now, but we're also talking about what elements do we want to give staff advice on for types of passive recreation.
Tell them to do what you asked them to do a year ago.
To investigate.
And perhaps they could use a little bit of initiative and come back to you with a plan that's based on one of the draft conservation easements we've got.
Let's back up.
Wait a minute. At the time in May last year, the Land Trust introduced staff to the partner that you're dealing with now, who were very, very keen on doing this, on holding this easement. And they're still there, and they're still very keen on holding this easement.
Michael, would you do me a favor?
Yes. Maybe.
Would you do me a favor and read again the part of the motion that spoke specifically to a conservation easement? Did it say move ahead and enact a conservation easement, or did it say look into the feasibility and the options for an easement?
Look into the potential conservation easement.
Okay, so staff has looked into it.
And what have they found?
They found that it is something that is an option. I'm just clarifying for you. I understand your position, and I'm not far off from you, but they did not say make a conservation easement happen. They said look into it.
Yes.
So
I have to say the minutes are not accurate. I moved to amend what Helen said to say to do a conservation easement in parallel with the plan, and the council agreed to that, to do it in parallel with this plan for the bike path. That's what I said.
I understand that, and I wish that the record reflected that so we knew.
The recording probably does.
We could go back and look at the tape.
Councillor Smith, it's not unreasonable to assume that if you ask somebody to look into something, they'll come back with something that we've looked into it. This is what we found. Here's a draft, or here's what we recommend, or here's an easement, conservation easement document, which is based on what we are going to do for Wheeler, or what other cities have done for parks or areas of land similar to this, or from the partner that the conservation partner that we're working with, get us a draft. They've been working on this. I mean, they've known about this for a year and been willing to work with staff for a year, and we've got nothing to show for it. You know, I once had a boss who was quite a well-known guy in Canada, and he went to Ottawa to the Minister of Foreign Affairs because he was unhappy about something to do with export. And he eventually got mad and he said, listen, my man, I pay your salary. You do what I tell you. Now, I don't pay anybody's salary, but my taxes do pay. Their taxes pay. I expect staff to
I wish I
do
could call it
something.
a salary.
I expect staff to do something, not to sit on it for a year.
Okay, so Michael, you can absolutely criticize me as much as you would like to my bosses. You may not criticize my staff. And if you haven't noticed, I'm not a man directing men what to do. I function a little differently, and I really disagree with your narrative about what's happened in the last year and how much effort we've put into this at the request of the council, who has governance processes in place, has documents in place, has structures in place. So if you want to yell at, let me finish. If you want to direct my bosses to take action against me, you are welcome to do that. You may not criticize my staff. Okay.
Staff is just used. The word staff is used in this text, and that's why I've used it.
You are a member of the community. You are a member of the community providing testimony to 5 members of a city council about action they are considering taking. That is the conversation we're having right now. So if you would like to talk to the 5 of them about my performance, you are welcome to do that. We started this conversation having 5 councilors talking about their interest in conserving part of this parcel, which I think is very much aligned to what you would like to do. So I think the more time we spend talking about that and the less time we spend talking about criticisms of me, although you are welcome to do that, we might have a more productive conversation.
I'm not aimed at, my criticism isn't aimed specifically at you. I think the council failed to do its job by telling you exactly what they wanted and when they wanted it.
Thank you, Michael.
They failed to tell you, and so it's reasonable that
you've made your point.
You've been busy, so it's
You've
taken
made your
a year.
point, Michael. You've made your point several times now. Thank you. Anything new you want to add that's new?
Yeah, I think you shouldn't undermine what the public asked you to do a year ago with very, very massive input from them, both for and against. But the majority were for a conservation easement in perpetuity, a paved path, and a few other things that were included in Councillor Emery's motion. And going back on that motion would be a terrible thing to do.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wants to speak? Roseanne, come up. How many people are online who want to talk? Mike and Aaron? Okay, we'll get to you soon online, okay? After Roseanne. Is the green light on?
Yes, it is.
Okay. No, hit it again. Bright green.
Oh, it was dull green.
By
It
yourself,
is now
yes.
bright green. Hi. My name is Roseanne Greco. I'm going to speak on my own behalf, but also as the president of the South Burlington Land Trust. So thank you, councilors, for all your work. Some of the things you're talking about, I'd like to address. I think maybe Mike, you talked about rush. So this parcel was purchased back in 2013. So there's been a lot of time. There have been lots of meetings, as Elizabeth pointed out. We've had all kinds of visioning sessions and from the very beginning, and you mentioned a few of them, and there have been all kinds of input, lots of input on this. So I don't know that we need more input. Input's great, but we've heard a lot. And I don't know that anybody ran the numbers, but it certainly seemed to me, as in the ones I participated, that there were far more people that wanted it to be preserved in its pristine natural state than wanted it to be transferred into an active or impervious surface area. But we didn't run the numbers. You did say something, Elizabeth, about what about 10 to 20 or 30 years down the road. I didn't know quite what you were getting at, but we can be absolutely certain that we're going to need clean air, clean water, and healthy food 10 years and 20 years and 30 years. That's a guarantee. You mentioned stormwater retention. You won't need a stormwater retention unless you put impervious surfaces in. But I am a little bit concerned about the farm area. We all will need food. And natural health grown food in our own backyard is the best. And if you're thinking about disturbing that area to the west, that's where the farm is to the west, then that's very concerning. So please keep that in mind. You talked a lot about balance. I think we're out of balance. I don't think we have enough of these passive, pristine open spaces. We got a lot of concrete, a lot of built up areas, a lot of active, but not as much passive. So if you're going to do a plan, look at how much passive is out there. If you're going to wait for another department to do something I just broke, oh well, I'll pay for it. I don't know what it is. But pushing it down the road, I think maybe that's where Michael's frustration comes. You know, if you're waiting on something and waiting on something and waiting on something, there'll be a different council up here who may be going back on what you talk about tonight. So I think there's, for those of us that have longed for the conservation of this land for 10 years, we want it conserved. Zoning can be changed. We've seen that over and over again. The state is doing all kinds of stuff that they didn't do before that overrides city authorities. The only way to actually preserve it is a conservation easement. And the land trust, the South Burlington Land Trust, will offer our assistance, help, efforts, research, whatever we can do to help you carry out what past councils have said they want to do and what the public say they want to do. So I hope you conserve it. I hope you take action, and we're here to help.
Thank you. Let's go to the online first. Yeah, there were two people.
Mike and Aaron Busby. Mike Semino and
Mike Semino, are you there? You're muted. Is he muted? I can't. Yeah. Mike, can you hear us? We think you're muted. Wait, can we come back to you? Oh, there you are.
Okay, am I all set?
We hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for recognizing me. And Mike Mittag, I appreciate your passion. It's nice to see somebody else sharing the kind of passion I typically share when I am in front of the city council. So this property was acquired quite a while ago, and I'm guessing that at some point in time after our community, with participation of hundreds more people than participated in the more recent city council decision, that there was a city council that met and probably approved of the master plan that the task force had come up with. I may be mistaken, and somebody could probably check on that for me, but I don't think it's uncommon for city council decisions to be changed or over time to, to change and evolve. So to hold out that, oh, what a shame it would be if we decided to head in another path because of this decision that the city council made, I'm not buying it. We want to operate in the present, and we want to do what is best for our entire community in the present. And I was really involved when the council took their vote regarding the bike path and, only wanting a few chairs and don't even put a piece of art here. I think the council, and it's a different council now, but that motion said a lot in my mind for how that council felt about our community and about what our parks are for. That decision could not have represented what our entire community wanted, in my mind. So I am hoping here, I get what people are saying about the master plan and waiting until 2025. For all of you who, I was there when this park was acquired. I was on the task force, and we were a little bent that the city never took action on what we put out there and wanted. And I think the city council approved it. So waiting a year to do the right thing, Parks are for people. Central Park in New York City does not have a conservation easement, and there's probably no property in this country that was under more pressure to be conserved in a way that the wealthy and the neighbors who were developing real estate near the park, the way that they wanted it. It took a lot of people and a lot of courage to resist the temptation to conserve Central Park in New York City and to allow for it to remain a park for the people. And that's what Hubbard should remain, a park for the people. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Aaron, you're next, and you're muted.
Hi, thank you.
We can hear you.
I'm a member of the park. You can hear me now? Yeah, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a member of the Park and Rec Committee, and I just want to state as a representative of that committee that we highly recommend waiting to do anything on this property in terms of an easement until after the whole audit has been completed. I mean, to your point, nothing is harmed by waiting, and a lot of people have referenced this evening the feedback from the community and having it be an easement, and I live in the community. I teach in the high school. I don't ever remember being solicited for any kind of feedback. I'm on the Park and Rec Committee. I'm a pretty involved person. And my concern is that the feedback that was received was perhaps diluted disproportionately to Southeast Quadrant residents. And the audit would allow everybody in the community, no matter where you live in South Burlington, to have a say about a piece of property that was purchased with everybody's taxpayer dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. Going back to the room, was there somebody in the back? Please. Make sure the green light's on and identify yourself.
Yes, my name's Jeff Nisley, and I've been a resident in South Burlington since 1997. Basically want to remind the city council this is a shared use bike. Everybody keeps referring to it as a bike path. It is not just a bike path. At the meeting in 2023, yes, it was decided to go ahead and have a paved surface. The nature of the paved surface was to be determined by cost and other issues. There was a lot of talk about use of concrete or a cool surface so that the pedestrians in the summer could use it more comfortably, as well as dogs and pets so they don't injure their paws. So there's been no update on what surface is going to be used or what surface is recommended. I remember that they did talk about doing a long-term cost analysis of concrete versus just asphalt. And again, never heard anything come from that either. I looked at the proposal with the master plan. I noticed that on the upswept area at the very end, there's a class 2 wetlands that the path is currently supposed to cross, and I don't think that they can with a class 2 wetland. So the parking lot also was kind of like, I think if you actually go to the minutes, that was decided to keep the footprint of the actual parking lot the same. And they suggested 18, but I have been going to the parks and recreation meetings as well as the bike path meetings, and their view is that the size was not limited to the footprint currently. So I think the city council needs to be aware of what actually the people want to have in a shared use path and keep that in mind, not just for the bicycles. I also want to throw out they need to do some kind of evaluation of e-bikes as well, since they tend to go a lot faster, and a lot of people using hopefully this path will be pedestrians and may not be able to get out of the way as easily. So something to slow down the e-bikes or bicycles in general. That's
Thank
all
you.
I want to add.
Thank you. Go back to online. Alan Strong, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you, councilors. I just wanted to put, my voice. Alan Strong, South Burlington resident since 2002. Just a vote in favor of a permanent conservation easement. I mean, I think some of the things that Mike said about parks being for people, I think, that's true in part. And I think part of the reason why humans are so drawn to parks is that intersection with the natural world. We're seeing all of these health benefits associated with being outside, being connected to birdsong, being connected to the natural world, that we've got to have a mix of both. And so making sure that this area is conserved and humans can use it, but at the same time, we're conserving that, the natural flavor of that area is really important. And, I guess I'd also say in support of what Roseanne said, I mean, I think the agriculture that's on the western side of the park is really important, and the opportunity to really have common roots growing fresh local food out there is really important as well. And so knowing that there's some prime ag soil on that property is, I think, also really important to conserve and keep that in mind in terms of moving forward and trying to protect the natural components of this area. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Doyle, did you want to say something?
Yes, please.
Please remember to identify yourself and make sure the green light's on.
Ryan Doyle. I live near City Center. I think this is the fastest I've biked to a meeting. I don't know how long Mike spoke for, but he was still talking when I walked in the door, so I feel like I got my cardio in for the day. I understand why this topic is really contentious. We've had a community that was developed around sprawl for a really long time, and understandably people felt disgusted by it. And we are now trying to reconcile a lot of these different emotions of that really quickly and fast. And I think what we're doing tonight isn't actually moving as fast as what some people would like. And I know that that's frustrating for them, but I also think it's really important. The reason why we're going ahead with a parks and open space plan conjointly is we're really trying to assess and layer those differences of active recreation, passive recreation, space that's more for nature, and the spectrum of where those intersect. We now have a parcel that the city spent a lot of money on, where we have different opinions going into it. And so I want to dissuade concerns of the public and also the concerns of the council with, like, we can do this as a community, get through the public process of the plan, and still acknowledge what Elizabeth said, which was that last summer, the people who came out with a lot of opposition was a very focal group who has a valuable input to the community, but is also not part of the same big open process that we had in years past before I lived in the community. And it's difficult when we have administrative changes and councilperson changes to keep continuity. That's going to be a struggle with municipalities. We can't move as fast as business at anything because we have a democratic process. And I appreciate all of you guys for, including Michael, for participating in that. We also have really great staff. Our staff, if you talk to them, they know a lot, they bring a lot. They're here till very late in the night for a lot of committee meetings. And so I just want to try to convince everyone that, like, we can do this process together. We can trust each other even if we don't all agree with each other. And we can move this forward in a way that conserves a lot of space and also leaves a little bit of opportunity for changes and flexing in the future as the needs of the public and the needs of their interaction with the nature change. And I'm very confident that the mix on this council can accomplish that over the next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Anybody else in the audience? Please come forward. Remember to identify yourself and make the green light bright.
My name is Amy Allen, and I'm a South Burlington resident in the Southeast Quadrant. I'm here today to ask you to not move forward on a permanent conservation easement for Hubbard Park. Permanent conservation easement will hamper future adaptations our community may need, both for recreation and climate change mitigation. First and foremost, consider that we may need Hubbard for climate change mitigation to ensure our community has the resilience to deal with the waters that are now flooding Vermont on a regular basis. One 2023 news story highlighted how this could play out. After historic flooding in Waterbury in 2011, a small field in nearby Duxbury was identified as a perfect spot for a floodplain that could provide a large amount of relief at modest cost. A $3 million investment in a field that would not require any homes or buildings to be removed would provide a reduction of 12 inches in flooding and prevent millions in damage to homes and businesses. The owners could have kept their land and been paid for its use or exchanged it for another piece of land. The owners refused. The state was reluctant to use eminent domain, and Waterbury flooded again in July 2023. We could likewise have similar need of Hubbard, with a conservation easement hindering the speed with which our community could respond to a need to address flooding, time that could mean more floods for our community, while the administrative details are being worked out to undo the conservation easement. Nobody can predict what tools we're going to need to use to deal with the effects of climate change, because nobody can foresee all of the impacts of climate change. No conservation easement could be written to be prescient enough to cover all that Mother Earth will be throwing at us in the decades to come. And likewise foresee the myriad ways that scientists and engineers will create to ensure resilience in our communities as we adapt. Nothing permanent should be done with Hubbard for this reason alone. We need adaptability to survive. Second, future citizens of South Burlington should be allowed to make their own decisions about the use of Hubbard. Right now, residents local to Hubbard have made the choice that it best serves as a natural area. We should not seek to freeze that as its only use, because as our community changes over time, so will our community's needs. The permanent conservation agreement in the middle of a residential area puts in place a system of generational inequity, whereby current citizens are not allowing future generations to use the land as our future residents will need. At a minimum, a conservation easement should not move forward at Hubbard until the Master Parks Plan is completed. Future generations of South Burlington residents should have similar choices to today's leadership about how taxpayer-owned land will best work for them and their families. Our children deserve those opportunities. Please do not deny our kids that piece of their future with a permanent conservation easement at Hubbard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? And nobody online? Mike, round two. Are you putting your hand in front of the camera for a reason, or are you just waving at us? Because
Yes,
hold on.
and
Hold on, Mike. One
the
second.
reason, and this will be quick, some are aware that there is a lease agreement between the city and Common Roots for the use of the 6 or so acres that are currently being used for agriculture. And that lease may contain a renewal option as well. I can tell you that there's certainly broad support among everyone that I talk to about Common Roots continuing to operate there and even enhancing. And here's again where you put yourself in a box, enhancing the utilization of some land for perhaps more community gardens and for activities that occur in conjunction with those gardens, similar to what Common Roots does over at Wheeler. So if we say you are never going to have a structure here that can help you host people that are involved with this ag program, I think that would be unfair to constrain our community in that way, as Amy mentioned. But my main point was there's a lease with Common Roots that amounts to a contract. So no anxiety over Common Roots disappearing there. Thank you.
Thank you. Nora Senecal, are you online?
Yes, I'm sorry, I can't get my camera to go on, so I apologize for that. Prior to Amy speaking, I guess my one question for the council is, the five of you kind of spoke to kind of your support of the easement and working with South Burlington Land Trust, but I haven't heard anybody kind of articulate really what are the potential risks really in terms of weighing out the risks and benefits and the consequences, as I understand it, of giving another entity, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this entity would have complete control over this area. And I guess I'm wondering, we've only been talking about kind of somewhat a little more one-sided, and I'm just wondering if any of the council members can speak to what are the consequences of the easement.
We already have easements on the Wheeler property, right? How many other conservation easements do we have in the city right now? But Wheeler has 2 Act 250 easements on it. Yep, there were 2 Act 250 easements that had to be put there because of developments in other parts of the city. And when they were examining putting the final conservation easement on it, they had to take that into account, and we were told that it wasn't going to be a problem. So that was the last, and I thought that we had finished that work, but yeah. So anyway, it looks like Robin Jeffers, did you want to say something? We can hear you now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, counselors. Thank you for recognizing me. And thank you to Alan, Mike, and Roseanne for speaking about Common Roots. Also speaking for Common Roots. The current lease is for 4 acres. And in discussions at Common Roots, as we look forward, and as you know, much of the food there goes to our food shelves so that there's food equity in our community. As that need is growing and not shrinking, our discussions are that at some point it would be beneficial to have more acres, not less acres. Just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
That's a question too. Robin, in my brief walk today, that land is not being farmed. What's the status of that?
My understanding is 2 acres are being farmed and 2 acres are not. 1 acre is too steep that we haven't been able to get our tractor through there, but that it is indeed being farmed, and it gets generally farmed with more late summer crops. Hubbard, squash, and things like that, winter crops.
Thank you. All right.
You're welcome.
Is it going to be something new, Michael?
Yes.
Okay, make it brief, please. We're behind time in our
Very
schedule.
brief. Besides the 4 acres that are being used by Common Roots, that most of the area to the west of Common Roots is wetland.
On the downhill.
Yeah.
At the bottom of the downhill.
Can't do anything with it.
Yeah, thanks. One last comment, Ryan?
Yes, thank you, Tim. Ryan Doyle. I think this conversation does bring up some additional things that we might want to parse out with the parks and open space plans, especially when it comes to like what part of that parcel is best for agriculture, and what part might want more stabilization or mounding to try to help with infiltration. Those would be important things to answer. Or even some of this could be kicked back to the NRCC. They are wrapping up their LDR LDR tree related segments. We were working on that today to get the tree species finalized, and we're close to it. So there could be something in here that gets tossed back to them to help additionally parse out before coming back to the council or more of those plans. The one thing I did want to mention is I was looking at the Wheeler Park invasive species plan today. It's from like 2011 or 13. There's no mention of Amur maples, and yet Hubbard and Wheeler are overrun with Amur maple saplings now. They grow 2 feet a year. And one of the things that has come up at a lot of NRCC meetings is the potential benefit of developing friends of these kind of conservation area committees that aren't necessarily like city committees, but are city directed to like help do things or fundraise or do the invasive weeding. And that might be something else you guys can kick back to them, because this is a hardwood tree species, and as it takes hold, it becomes much harder for us to get it out and replace it with the actual species that are native that we want to have there. So that's, in terms of like what could be done maybe quickly, that actually might be a pretty fast term thing that committee could turn around with by the end of the summer. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention quickly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, so we've had some input from the public. We've had some discussion among ourselves. The the reason for this agenda item is to give staff direction, again, about a possible conservation easement with a third party that the July council put in their motion to, to create a conservation easement on that property. So this is the next step, is to try and crystallize that a little bit more, because it sounds like we may have a willing partner, right? So, and we've been trying to solicit among the council what some of the parameters are for that easement, right? And I think we have some consensus about the area of the park that we really don't want anything to happen to at all for permanent conservation, right? And then there's some question about what happens west of the bike path, right? So do we want to direct the staff to ask, this other party, what types of passive of recreation could be built into that easement that would satisfy the council and the public at the same time, and of course, common routes to guarantee their access to farming at least the 4 acres, if not other acres and more acres in the future. Is that something that the council would like to do?
Yes.
Can I clarify, in the motion that council made in July of 2023, that excluded things, some of them excluded by not being made in the motion, but I believe that motion excluded agricultural. Is that accurate?
Oh, I don't think so.
Can I just clarify, because we're talking about two different things. One is the plan to put the shared use path, to put the parking, to put the lights, right? What that plan is, and that was most of the motion. What we're talking about now is what might happen in the future and what uses a conservation easement might allow in the future. Right? We're not, I don't think, talking about reopening the existing plan for what's going to happen with Hubbard. What we're talking about here is what uses we might allow the conservation in the conservation, so that in 5, 10, 15 years, some may look back and say, let's expand the agriculture, let's put in a play structure, let's put benches, let's put tables, and do some other things that are consistent with that being, with the natural character of that area.
Yeah, and I think, from my perspective, coming on a council in March, what I'm reacting to is not unlike what we've heard today, which is there are still strong feelings about the Hubbard Park area. When I was directed to the May and July meeting minutes, I would say largely 97% of that July meeting that resulted in an action was focused on the bike path, and paved or not paved, and 3% were the add-on actions that were articulated in the motion and the action taken, with what I read literally as, staff would look at the potential for an easement. So Jesse, to your earlier comments, it kind of took on the nature of, not this directive. So I understand that. I guess my fundamental question is, because I think there is agreement in principle on a fair amount of the property. And I don't know, Andrew, if you're saying the plan is sort of what happens on the other part, but could there be a parallel path to have discussions with the potential partner, but also to capture some of the thoughts here and maybe some re-engagement with the public, again, in the spirit of not going back to 2015, but potentially looking at some of the things that weren't considered. And I would include agriculture in there because it wasn't part of the action. And there were other elements that came up for me, but I can't summarize them all here. But I guess my question is there a parallel path opportunity here that causes no harm?
Lori?
I was going to just piggyback on what Elizabeth said, and in trying to find a path that we might all be able to agree on. Suggesting that staff move ahead and look at what their options are for an easement, what they are for the west part of the property, what they are for the east part of the property, in preparation for, or to give us information so that we can better make decisions, and understanding that we may still need to look at how we move from where we are now to an actual decision and what the options are to do that, whether it's just a council vote, whether it's putting it on a citywide vote, what the mechanisms are that could be used for parsing this contentious issue in a way that really respects the community. So that would be moving forward and also getting feedback on how we can move this to completion in the future.
I think that the compromise here is preserving those natural areas which truly shouldn't be disturbed, right? And then also making sure that the public has access to that area that's west of the bike path so they can enjoy passive recreation there, and also include agriculture. I think we need to formulate that language to give to staff to have them go examine that with this third party and tell us what is possible. We're not saying we want a paved road going all the way up, to an event barn, right, with a gazebo and lights and a patio. And we're not saying that with water and power and light. We're not saying that. We're just saying what is within the constraints that is feasible for a conservation easement that guarantees access to the western area for those with disabilities, right? For those who want to appreciate a sunset and be able to go there,
Yep.
right?
I also just want to clarify that the eastern portion, if it gets conserved, will still be accessible to all of our residents. So
Yes, absolutely.
nobody's suggesting that a conservation easement would make that land inaccessible to our residents.
It just means it can't be built on.
Yes.
It has to be maintained. The invasives have to be removed and other things like that to improve upon its natural state.
Yeah.
So does that sound like what we want to tell staff?
Can I just,
Mike?
just add, yes, in general, but I would also add that I think that there's benefit to also drawn in information from the master plan, because part of it will be saying there are other opportunities, there are other areas that are being addressed in the community to meet whatever those needs that you have that you aren't going to see possibly at Hubbard Park. And in that way, I think the goal is, and what I think both Elizabeth and Lori were saying, is to get to a place where there's a broad sense of, okay, all equities have been taken care of, all options have been looked at, vested interests have been taken care of, and it makes it a sustainable decision that I think the community broadly embraces, and I think that's what we want.
So I hear what you're saying, but I don't want to wait until 2025. I think that's waiting too long, and I can think that one person in the audience would think that's an extra year too long as well. So, but I think that if we tell staff about what the requirements are for the western part, right? And if that's like passive children's recreation, if it's like one of those structures like they have at the City Hall Park, whatever that might be, as long as they're so that the third party will tell us what they think would be allowable, right? And as long as our objectives are met and we get feedback, and we're going to get feedback, and we're not going to settle it right, in one loop. It's probably going to take a couple of cycles to get what we want. But I think that that's the path that we need to take, because we definitely heard from the public a year ago that they want it conserved, but another half said we want a bike path and we want to be able to get in there and see the sunsets, right? And enjoy it, and have the kids do something as well, right? And also we need agriculture. So for my part, I think that staff has heard that pretty clearly, at least from 4 councilors. Am I correct? I know that you want to wait for the you know, the master plan, I think that's too long to wait at this point.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that whatever we direct staff to do, we're not making any decisions tonight. And the information that comes back gives us opportunities to review it and assess it and see if we need to make modifications to that as well.
So is that adequate for staff?
So what Tim just said, do two others of you agree with that sentiment?
Yes.
I
So
hope that we could
what
get all
I'm
five of us
hearing-
too.
I got a yes.
Well, we're not taking action.
No. Well, we're getting consensus. So, yeah.
The goal is to gather information, to continue to develop the idea and see what the possibilities are.
Then we got five.
I think that is what we want to do, is to build a consensus that this works for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that work?
We'll see how you feel when it comes back to you.
Does it need
That's
to be?
all we can ask for.
Does it need to be clarified in a motion, or is it clear enough as it's been described?
I always prefer motions, but I think we can read between these lines. Jared, are you going to give up?
I was just going to agree with my boss, Jesse, that yes, a motion would probably be preferable, but yeah. I hear you loud and clear from my seat here, but I think a motion for the record, if this comes back up, might be best from the council.
Is the chair allowed to make a motion? Because you've sort of described.
If somebody wants to repeat what I said and make that as the motion, that would be fine.
I'll try and give it a shot. The motion is to work with the third party on a conservation easement that would conserve the area of Hubbard Park to the east of the proposed shared use path, would also conserve to the west, but allow for uses to the west that are consistent with public access, equity, for instance, expanded agriculture, play structure, benches, tables, and other potential future uses consistent with retaining the natural character of that area.
Passive recreation, do you want to?
Passive recreation, yes.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion?
Can I discuss that? I don't think we agreed, and I don't think you mentioned, Tim, an agreement to conserve the space west until we understood feedback from the potential partner on the feasibility of that,
Which partner?
the trust partner. That we were going to solicit or ask city staff to solicit feedback
Right.
on agreement or not, a capability of conserving with those limitations or with those potential improvements in the future.
Isn't that what you proposed, I thought?
I heard Andrew's motion being that we're directing them to find out what it would be to get that easement, and then that's something that we can chew on and possibly ask for modification on.
Yeah. So we're.
Why don't we ask Jessie to, since she's the one who's typing, what
Have
does
you
she
typed
think
it
she
in
has
yet?
written?
So what?
And how do you interpret it, since it'll be, you know, as our good friend the lawyer said.
So, Sue, I wish you were in the room. What I heard Andrew's motion to be is to work with a third party on a conservation easement that would conserve to the east of the proposed path and would also conserve to the west, but would allow for uses consistent with public access, equity, agriculture, play structures, benches, tables, and other potential future uses consistent with passive recreation. But it is, I think your point is, it was would also conserve to the west.
Mm-hmm.
That was his motion.
Yeah, and I guess we don't know that capability. If the rest of the council is comfortable that that's an exploratory conversation and we're going to get feedback from the partner on that,
that's what we'll get.
I think that's
Yeah.
adequate. But the motion does say conserve the whole property with discussions on these future improvements. It just broke it into two parts.
And if I might clarify, I hear it as conservation that allows for use, particular uses being recreation.
Mm-hmm.
But does
That's
that,
what I said.
but does that mean that the conservation, again, it's, all right, if you're asked to interpret this, that if we cannot find what it seems to be an equitable solution there, there's still a commitment to conserve to the west? Or is it implied
There's no
that-
commitment through this. This is just an exploration of what a conservation easement could allow. And as you've discussed tonight, that easement could be broken up in different ways across the property to allow for different things. And so will the partner come back to you with suggestions as to rec on one side and complete wild, non-touched on the other side, perhaps?
And
Some
what
soup
comes
on the
back to
carpet
us,
for it.
what comes back to us may be a menu of options
Right.
that we can then take number 15 and number 16 and make a good meal out of.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Ready for the vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Yay.
All right. So, moving on to, excuse me?
Quick break.
We're going to take a 5-minute break right now, so folks hang on, and we'll be back at exactly 9 p.m. Thank you.
No, so this is being run by Elizabeth and Mike right now. Andy, I think maybe who you're talking about. So once Elizabeth and Mike have done a few, I think the idea is that Elizabeth is going to come back. You guys are going to come back and say how it's going and get other people to step up.
And then figure out how we.
Yeah, so let's should we come back after 3 or 4?
No, just after 2. Just after 2. Just do 2. 2, right. And then
Other counselors are
we're chomping at the
eager to
bit.
be involved.
Yeah.
Nobody was interested when I brought it up.
So, because it is on the website, because there is on the city website, Coffee with a Counselor. There are dates and times, and it says participant councils TBD.
Success has a
I'd like to
thousand
fill my name in for some of those TBDs that are on the website.
Yeah. So,
Perhaps during other business, we could take this up?
yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. So we are back at the SB June 17th meeting, and we are at item number 9 on our agenda, which is discussion to continue to review the use of the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA funds allocated to date, and discuss future possible allocations, and provide direction to staff, Jesse Baker and Martha Machar, the finance director, who is before us right now. Good evening. So, do you want to give the background, or?
So this is a follow-up item to your last council meeting where Martha prepared this memo for you. You asked us at the last meeting to provide you with a spreadsheet of requests that had come to you. So we did that and indicated where projects had moved forward either with ARPA or other funding. And so this is, again, maybe a risky other open conversation for you about how we can help you make decisions in the future.
Where's the lawyer? Where's the lawyer?
He's back there.
Hi, Dave.
And to that, I also just want to add that the 1.5 has to be allocated by the end of this year. So we only have 4 months, or you only have 5 months to make decisions.
But just to clarify that, right, just so we're all on the same page, what it means to allocate, we're permitted to spend that on anything, right? So if we were to allocate it to the general fund with kind of the understanding that we have $1.5 million, say, extra budget in the following year, we could do that.
That's correct. You could say that you're allocating the full amount to cover for salaries for a specific department, and then the already allocated general fund money would go into this fund balance, which you could then use later on to fund other projects.
Can you just
that you
clarify?
might like.
You did last time say there was one specific thing we could not use it for pensions. So you're saying anything but pensions. To Andrew's point, in the general budget is acceptable application.
So the regular expenditures, pension expenditures that come with the salaries within the year could be funded with the ARPA fund. is that the ARPA fund could not be allocated to fund the pension,
Yeah.
correct?
I see. Okay, I was just wondering.
And it can't be used to buy Jesse a sports car.
I mean, it
If the
could.
council said yes, you can use
Please
it.
do not do that.
And
It
electric
can
board.
it can be used for any municipal purpose. It cannot be used to go buy Beta an airplane. It's not a municipal purpose.
And the deadline scans are allocation at the end of this year, which, you know, we have this retreat ahead of us, which is a great opportunity. But once it's allocated, there's an expenditure day. I mean, it's the end of the following year, right?
End of 2026.
End of 2026.
Yep.
Correct.
Once it's allocated, we can't change the allocation by the end of this year. Once we identify what its purpose is for, we can't change that. Is that true?
So there is an annual treasury report that is done annually. So if you allocate it this year, next year in April, I'll have to report on it that it has been allocated for this purpose.
So one of the techniques we could use is you could allocate things generally. So you could say, and correct me, Martha, here, you're going to allocate the full balance to implementing the Parks Master Plan. So have it be broad enough that a lot of things could fit under that. But then we'd still only have 2 years to actually get things done. So you still have to make hard decisions at some point.
Can you allocate it more broadly to the general fund?
Well, I think that's what Martha was suggesting about
Yeah.
allocate it to like pay for a set of salaries that then would allow that tax capacity to roll into general to fund balance for future allocation.
Okay.
Is that what you were suggesting? Was the way
That's
to do that?
correct. Yep.
Okay. So there are ways to give ourselves future flexibility on actually spending the funds if we choose to do that through allocation.
That's correct.
To me, that's not. I appreciate that possibility, but I really like the idea of coming up with a set of items that are from these spreadsheets and allocating it because these are the purposes that we want for these funds, right?
Yep.
And then we don't have. Then we're done with that part. You know, I really see value in doing that. If we just dump it in, not dump it, but if we put it all into one bucket, right? And then I think the intent of it was to help these municipalities, right, with COVID era difficulties, right? And then they released the criteria, right, the restrictions on it, except for a few, like you can't use it for to pay down the pension fund, right? So,
Is there? I mean, from my perspective, you know, I just come back to the last budget being passed by 2%. You know, we heard that the 13 or average 13. I guess we're not 13%.
13.8.
13.8, but that's the average. I think we're going to be lower. It's going to be a challenging budget year next year, and I was just wondering that in the context of the retreat on Wednesday, you know, do we look at how we expend these ARPA funds? There's 1.5 million surplus. That's after we met the 16.99%. I wasn't clear on that. No?
So you're talking about fund balance
yeah, fund
surplus
balance.
now? So we have not hit the 16% yet. That's available after the 8%.
Right, but does that mean we will not have the likely the 1.5? You mentioned once having or 900,000. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're talking about the surplus coming out of FY24.
Yeah, FI. So I was just saying, you know, we have a pool of 1.5, 900,000, and then this discussion about this year's budget.
Yes, that is right.
And to me, it just seems that given how challenging it was to get the budget adopted last year, and the situation I think is going to be equally challenging this year, that we try to use, you know, a discussion. When we talk about these funds, we talk about them and how we use them in a way to basically manage our budget situation.
Mike, just, you know, I don't, obviously we need to be very careful about our budget, but just in terms of the storyline, I do think probably part of the tightness of the city budget was reflective of folks feeling angst around budgets generally and the school budget. I'm not sure if we had the school budget at the same time. we would have had the same result, the same tight result on the city budget. So I don't know, we should read too much into it.
But I'm maybe, something I don't know, but I'm under the impression, or at least what I've heard is, next year is going to be equally challenging with the school budget, most likely. So we'll have, I think, the same sort of headwind.
So I
It's
think
just a thought.
my understanding of how we're spending these funds is that we're not using these funds to help offset budget expenses. We're using them for things that are not ongoing budget items so that we're not deferring what is going to be a budget issue to another year. So we're talking about using it for capital improvements as opposed to make our budget
Right,
easier.
but the capital improvements, I mean, this is, I guess, what I'm saying is, like deferred capital projects and expenses or investments when the committee that Andrew's liaison, the economic development plan that will hopefully guide us on how to grow revenues, things that basically aren't just expenditures, but things that basically take care of expenses that we have, or ideally help us generate additional revenues going forward. There's that proposal that came from the staff about helping incentivize moving into small businesses moving into the downtown area. I think it's in our interest to, sooner we have businesses in there, the sooner we start generating revenue, both local option tax as well as property tax, as well as creating sort of an excitement level that people have been waiting for. I mean, those are kinds of things that, in terms of the projects, that at least for me would, we'd get the biggest bang for our buck, so to speak.
We have this bucket of money that we can spend on almost anything.
Yep.
We have a lot of requests from the committees, and some of them are really good requests, and they probably will do, positive things, right? Create good information or good results. And some of them are, some of them are like, if I could have $1 million right now, what would I do with it, right? Yeah. And I understand that. If I were a committee, I would say, give me the whole thing, right? But they can't all have it, right? So I would ask the council to consider going through this spreadsheet right now, one by one, and tell me which ones do we think are the most feasible, and then how can we allocate this 1.5 million so that it's distributed fairly for projects that will have good outcomes for the city. I mean,
so
Kim, before we do that, can we just clarify some of the items on here,
Sure.
which maybe actually are already, I think, taken care of? It'd be helpful to me to just be really clear about these. So, for instance, the Heinsberg shared use path. My understanding is that's actually now funded between our match and state funds. Is that right, Jesse? The $1.3 million is not actually a current request anymore. That's kind of done. Is that accurate?
That's correct, the
Okay.
Heinsberg Road, but I think the committee request in here was not just for the Heinsberg Road, there were other share use paths included.
No, but I mean, this was for Heinsberg, right? The $1.3 million.
That's covered, you're saying? That's already been
I believe that's why I just want to clarify. I believe that's now done, right? We've got the money for that.
So we should draw a line through that?
So I think you are both correct. They want more money, but I think this 1.3 is for Heinsberg Road, and I think with the 200,000 that you have previously approved, that's why we added in the green columns at the end.
Mm-hmm.
I think we could.
The
yes,
1.3 is now
done.
moved.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Then Natural Resources has asked for money for an open space plan, which also shows as open, but we've agreed. I thought we're going to do an open space and park plan. So actually, their request has also, in effect, been satisfied, right?
Which one are you at? Just so if we're going through
NRCC develop an open space plan.
NRCC.
$25,000.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's already. Is that also confirmation that issue has been? It definitely makes it easier.
Sorry, I opened up the spreadsheet.
So.
Can Andrew, which?
Well, there's a line: Natural Resources develop open space plan request 25, and nothing next to it is an action, right?
Yep,
That's
you're
also
correct.
done.
All right.
Then the Energy Committee recommended to hire a consultant to implement the cap, but we've actually done one better. We've hired a real employee, right? So I'm wondering whether that is also kind of satisfied.
That's the first one, the consultant to help accelerate.
Yeah. I mean, in my mind, the employee is better than the consultant.
So what you're getting at is that the 400 or $4.2 million is actually less than
Well,
that.
that's what I'm just trying to
Because some of
clarify
these have been
these
allocated.
items to make sure that we understand where we really are, right?
Are you saying that 100% of the funding request goes away with what you're suggesting? Or are there residuals?
No, there are still residual. There are still funding requests out there. I'm just trying.
No. I mean, with these specific items, like there's a $500,000 in for this consultant. You're saying we hired an employee, so we don't need to consider that $500,000.
You mean 100,000?
I mean,
No,
100,000.
100,000. They had 100,000.
Consultant help accelerate heat is the second.
I
Is
grabbed
the first
wrong
one. The first one.
Consultant to help accelerate heat
First-
point development.
Yes, it's poorly written.
Yeah.
Oh, I got the wrong
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
So my understanding is
Yeah.
we're discussing this tonight. I wanted to say that I find this spreadsheet to be incredibly helpful. But when I look at having 1.5 million to spend and 4.2 million of requests, I don't feel prepared tonight to boil it down to where we're actually going to spend the money. I would like to have some time to really look at and consider and talk to different people and make informed decisions.
Well, if that's the way you feel, right, and
Yeah.
we've tried to go through the spreadsheet several times between the last council, right?
Okay.
We made a few attempts, and I'm just saying, if we can deal with the spreadsheet, right, it's almost like I want to add 5 more columns: Lori, Mike, Tim, Elizabeth, and Andrew.
Yeah.
And you put a check mark or a value that you would like to have put against that requested amount, right? And at the bottom, we'll total them all up and find out if we're close. You got to keep in mind you're trying to get to 1.5 million. Then when we come back, we negotiate it. We'll say, you wanted 20, you wanted 15. What's the number, right? And then we're going to whittle it down and get right to the 1.5 because there are some things on here that I think are really necessary. And I think that we all have opinions like that.
And I think it's not. I think what your initial thing is coming up with what would the list. I mean, I did that before coming here, using a common theme, and it's not that hard if you. Yeah. So do you want us to share them now or share them later? Because I already did what you asked for.
Well, I mean, I can tell you the ones that I like
Sure.
right off the bat. Do you want to hear those?
Yes.
Yep.
Sure, why not?
So-
And then we all can do that, and then we can then all reflect on it.
So right off the bat, the economic development plan for the economic development committee, I think, is a really great idea. Right?
Economic
But
development.
we're-
Wait a
let's if we can last one right. Yeah.
We're going out of
Yep. Yeah. You're going reverse
yes,
order.
yes, right. The 50,000 for the public arts committee to develop a cultural plan and get a consultant to do that. Really excellent plan.
Which-
Public arts
yep.
are really
Which can-
important for the city.
Help us.
So it's
Tell us
about
where-
It's
7
from the-
up from the bottom.
7 up from the bottom.
And which one is this? The arts?
Develop cultural plan. If you go in the, I think it's you
Yeah,
look
I
in the
see it.
middle. Right.
Yeah.
The book van for the library is really important because they don't have one, or it broke down, or it's gone.
They don't have
They
one.
used to have.
Oh, they haven't had one since I've been here.
They had one when they were at the community library for a while. I helped put the books in it when it was christened, and it was a used van at that point. It's a really good investment in getting the library so they can do outreach around the whole community, right? We did talk about energy committee and mowers, right? Is that
That's done though,
That's
right?
Oh,
That's
it's
been
done?
funded. That's
Which
been,
one? Which-
Mo's been funded, I think.
Energy
Right?
committee.
It says, oh, it's in the cap. Okay.
Where? Which one is this? So I can cross it out. Energy committee. How far down?
But
2 down.
2 down. Buyback gas fired equipment for income. No, which one? 2 down from energy committee.
Purchase
Purchase
one
one
electric.
electric. Oh, I crossed out the bad one, so it's no longer 2 down. Okay.
Part of
As we can
budget,
cross out.
cap budget.
Does it cover all?
Yeah,
I'm
this-
also noting these on the spreadsheet. I copied
Oh,
your
super.
list, Martha, so we can send it around later.
So you'll send us an updated list.
Yep.
Great.
Okay.
I mean, take your own notes for sure.
Yeah. What was the other one so Tim, you've got 3 so far?
Yeah, I think 3. The book van, the economic development plan, the public arts committee, so the cultural plan, and I think that was all. That's my wish list, at least for right now, right? So maybe somebody else would
Sure.
like to
Yeah.
make some.
I went with, because we'll deconflict, so I just went for what would I do if I had, if I were to make a decision on 1.5. Just so you know, I try to use a common denominator, which was what I was saying before. How do we pay forward? How do we do something that returns return? So, at the top of the list was what the economic development plan.
That's at the bottom of the list.
The top of my list, the bottom of the other list. Then I finished the funding for, and this is a question to Jesse, this system permitting modernization.
System modernization?
Yeah, it's funded at 50. The request is 150. So to me, it helps us be efficient, effective.
So it needs to be 100?
100. So I would put 100 there. Then I also said the deferred maintenance on which is 815 for what is that for the Veterans Memorial Park.
Can I ask about that? I'm sorry, to clarify. We in our consent agenda, we approved hiring a consultant to examine. Is that the same thing? The consultant's going to come back and actually tell us what
we need, and we're going to have that very quickly. So
whether it's 815 or whether it's $1.5 million, or whether it's 100,000. So I mean, this is kind of a number that's not. So this is a number that we're going to be examining.
So my idea would be to park the number there, and if we get lucky, he comes back and says it's less than that. But anyways, to me, it just as a priority that
But how soon could we get a number, an approximate number from that consultant? Do we have an idea?
Adam made it sound like it was quite quick.
If that's a priority, you could allocate the number for the consultant plus any of the actions recommended, right?
How much money is in that deferred maintenance line?
815.
850,000.
Out of control.
815 or 15?
No, you guys are doing
Numbers
great.
are so small.
No.
So yes, and yes.
15. Yeah.
We have the money now to do the inspection. Our hope was to have that information back for the FY26 budget development process. And if you notice in the column that I've called staff verified, that 815 is not staff verified. That's why we're doing this investigation.
Yeah.
Well, if it would be possible to get that turned around, that's where I would focus it. And just the last two to get to that magic number is the ADU grant primer, 250,000. Housing also starts generating returns for us. And then the last thing is whatever the difference is, which I think I figured out is 145, maybe less if I did the math quickly. And that is this staff proposed incentive fit-up grants to small businesses looking to locate on the Market Street. And again, to me, the way I looked at it is all of these have returns on our investments.
What was the number you calculated for that one?
I think 145, but let me see if I did the number. 15, I may have. And who knows, it may come up short and there's a lot of money left over to spend. 100, 145 maybe. Oops.
I could do that.
1410.
So
I won't find anything else. There we go.
Tim, so far you've spent 300,000. Do you have more that you want to add? So far you came up with 300,000.
Yeah, those are the top ones for me. But I thought I'd just let the rest of you pick out, and see what we get for a total.
So I agree with the economic development plan. I actually had suggested to that committee do that. So yes, I agree with the cultural plan, 50. I like the energy committee's idea of providing some incentives for the cultural plan.
Public arts.
Mm-hmm. I like the energy committee's idea of providing incentives for e-bikes to lower income households. I think they asked for $35,000 for that. And I would take the remainder and allocate it toward a city green.
Towards what?
A city green.
Oh, city green. Oh.
Just on that, I mean, it's in, on that question, I saw Jesse came back with what was the figure? Because that would be like a down payment on the city green. Because the figure was, what was it, 5 million?
What I
It's so-
saw was if we bought the land without buildings, which I don't think we should buy buildings, and developed a green without a lot of structure, it would be 2.7.
2.7?
And I think that with the ARPA funds, with the open space funds, we'd cover it, maybe a little bit of surplus. I think it would certainly be doable.
Andrew, can I just run through what I think I captured of yours for the economic development plan, city green, cultural plan, e-bikes.
E-bikes, yeah.
Okay.
And since I came up short 90,000 cultural
Doing great work. Where did that go?
Great, that's your list? Okay. Elizabeth?
Okay, I go to the school where you allocate 100%. I did have a question before I start, though. With the recent change in the subsidy for internet for those folks who might qualify from a socioeconomic standpoint, is there a fallback position on that? Do we know at the state level or anything?
I have no idea.
The last I heard was that the money had gone away, that the program ended from the federal government.
That's
And,
what you reported last time.
and I don't know what those people are going to pay next.
Well, I only bring that up because when I did go back to some of the criteria that was received from public input and a variety of input, you know, the origin of these funds during COVID were related to COVID, so that connectivity was an issue for a lot of people at the time. So what I kind of came up with is an agreement on economic development. I think veterans projects should be funded with any incremental balance going to implementation of a recommended plan. The system upgrades that were noted for permitting and finance, the book van, and then I just put anything left over in an incentive. There were a number of energy incentives. I thought we had weatherization, EV, some others. I don't know the total amount, but I thought there could be potentially an incentives bucket that might fund behaviors that would drive the climate action plan forward.
Lori, did you already give us our?
I did not.
You're going to give it to us?
I will give, yes,
Okay.
I think that both the cultural and economic plans make a lot of sense. I think that the Energy Committee incentives make a lot of sense. I would like to see
Which ones, Larry? Which ones?
I was not being specific right now. I'd like to spend about 2.5 million, so I haven't narrowed it down yet.
Big eye.
Yeah, I got big eyes here. Now I've gotten sidetracked. I think that having a city hall park or green is something that I would really like to see funds go towards. And I don't know what quantity that is, but I would like to have a little more time to complete my list.
And that's fine. If we can agree on some items tonight, that's real progress because we wouldn't have had that before.
Yep.
Right. So do we have any money left, or is it all spent?
If we go with Mike's, we're all done.
Now that I've done the culture. Because the rest goes to the incentive.
And since he was the first up to bat, he gets to take it all.
And if you get another million, then you can do yours too.
Thank you.
I think we all have agreed on the economic development plan and the cultural plan.
Yep.
So we can check those. I think.
That's one she's
got.
Yeah.
And it sounds like three of us were interested in funding some of the Energy Committee incentives.
Three of you are. Yeah, I appreciate that idea. There are already programs with GMP and Vermont Gas for some of those. And I
And the
do
federal
not want to
government.
get down in the weeds with people on their income levels and having to figure out whether they qualify for this and that.
Yep.
Because these other organizations are already doing that.
Not for EVs. So I agree for weatherization. You know, it's like
For weatherization for the city buildings, I'd like to see it used for that if there are some that need it.
Yeah.
You know, the older buildings, whether it's fire stations or,
But I mean, right. So there are really extensive programs. You can basically get your home weatherized for free up to like, I don't know, 120% of median area income. It's a workforce issue. But I don't think there's really, there are incentives for EV bikes, or if they are, they're de minimis, and that would
you can get up to $200 back from GMP.
for EV.
Yeah.
Yep.
For a bike, an e-bike. Yeah.
For an e-bike.
I would agree with Tim on the if they're old buildings that have weatherization that are property, because that also then reduces our expenditure footprint and frees up additional revenue. So it's a way of again returning to us if we do it for the city, where if we do it from someone outside, it's money. Yeah.
We have a member of the public that wants to speak. Can you come to the microphone again? Make sure it's green and give us your name again.
I hope this is okay because it said discussion on
Amy Allen, right?
Yes, Amy Allen, South Burlington resident. I got to tell you, I've taken my kids to play dates and whatnot, friends who are low income lately, and I could almost guarantee you the number of low income families in this community that want e-bikes are zero. Like
I couldn't understand what you said. I'm sorry.
The number of low income families that want e-bikes, that is the best way you can help them. Or subsidies for e-bikes is zero. Like that's not a practical thing for people who live in parts of the community where there's no trails, there's no truly safe roadways with a decent shoulder for them. It's not practical. Early on in the ARPA Funds discussion, at one point there was some criteria that the city council was using, and it included looking at what do lower income families need, people who are impacted at higher rates or, in greater ways than some of our wealthier neighbors that doesn't seem to be the calculus here. So I would urge you to maybe reconsider that. There's a lot of people in this community who are really, really hurting, and a lot of what you're talking about isn't going to help them.
I think a library book van to take books out to
That's
kids.
a great one.
Yeah.
I think even the economic development plan would be great to get more, jobs within walkable areas near bus lines, that kind of thing. I'm not saying everything, but I'm saying I think that that's not been being used as a criteria across the board. So please reconsider our neighbors who can't be here because they're barely getting by.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's our total?
Your total is 1.6 million with no dollar values in climate action, city green, or those two.
Okay. So
if we say yes to everything you all just said,
it's 1.6. Okay.
And is it conceivable that, I guess, that if the park, that's just an estimate, so that could either go up or down. Is that factored into when you say 1.6 million?
So 1.6 million is all the things you just said yes to, all of you, that had a dollar figure attached.
Can
there's
you read those back, Jesse?
no dollar figure attached to City Green. So we read back what you've said yes to.
Yeah, and the numbers.
Yeah.
Sure. So ADU program, Mike said yes to 225,000.
Oh, so you're reading back items that somebody said yes to,
Yes.
not that we all said yes to.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, fine.
I would think it's good.
That's good.
Isn't it higher than that if you include Andrew's allocation for the city park?
Well,
It is much higher. There is no dollar associated with City
So-
Green. Or
Yeah.
incentives.
That's like a
Okay.
wish balance if there's,
Yeah.
So keep going.
Okay, so Mike said yes to ADUs.
Yep.
Andrew said yes to Energy Committee subsidizing e-bikes at 35,000. Tim and Elizabeth said yes to. I just did something weird. Tim and Elizabeth said yes to a book van at 160.
160, yeah.
Tim, Andrew, Mike, and Lori said yes to a cultural plan at 50,000. Mike and Elizabeth said yes to Veterans Memorial Deferred Maintenance at 815,000. Mike and Elizabeth said yes to system modernization at 100,000. Mike said yes to small businesses on Market Street, incentives for small businesses on Market Street at 145. You all said yes to an economic development plan at 100,000. And I've added an Elizabeth Laurie one about incentives for climate action as a placeholder with no dollar figure attached.
And all those numbers come up to 1.6 with no dollars attached for the Elizabeth and Lori.
And City Green.
Or the City
Or
Green.
the City Green.
The ADU was Mike?
Yes.
That was you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, one thing on the ADU is there are incentives in place right now. I believe I heard that at the Affordable Housing Committee, that there are grants available.
If that's the case, just like with the energy on Tim's
I mean, I
point,
guess I would make sure we clarify
if
that.
that's the case, then I don't see why we should do other people's jobs. But I was operating on the assumption since it was on the list that, we were trying to start that. I know you went to an event recently about that. That was all part of that process. But if there is, then, I can withdraw that. I mean, I would not put that forward.
And Jesse, will you share that spreadsheet with us?
I sure will.
Thank you.
But does this seem like a good, we've made some progress tonight. We've actually put stars against things and names, and we have a total.
Yeah.
So would she'll distribute that, right? And then we'll get back together at a future date and we will argue a little bit more and try to crystallize and get down to 1.5.
And I would also like to add some more numbers. I would like to do a little more reviewing, and so I'll get those to Jesse.
Okay.
Okay.
Make some more proposals.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't come prepared to do that tonight.
Is that good? Okay, I got a thumbs up. Great. So moving on to number 10, I need somebody to make a motion to convene as the Liquor Control Commission tonight.
I move to convene as the Liquor Control Commission.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're now in session. We need a motion to approve the licenses for Doubletree by Hilton outside consumption limited permit, Delta Hotels by Marriott outside consumption permit as well.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And now we need a motion to come out of liquor control.
I move to come out of liquor control.
Second.
We have a motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're out of liquor control, and now we're at item 11, other business, but we also have a bunch of papers to sign.
Well, yeah, but can we, again, so on the city website, there is actually a very nice graphic, coffee with a council, it looks very official. There are dates, there's places. The names are TBD. So who's ever doing this website on the city, I would volunteer my name for the following two sessions, and whoever would like to join me, if we want to do two, is welcome.
What are the dates, Andrew?
There's July 13th and July 20th.
I can do July 20th.
Yeah.
These are Saturdays.
I think so.
Yeah, one thing to clarify is in order to get these off the ground, I'm funding these out of my city council stipend. And so I was waiting to see how successful they were before I came back and shared that information and requested that maybe we use some of the fund that's budgeted for outreach activities. So just FYI on that.
I'm happy to do either. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So do you want to wait for your second, event, and then we can set other names to the schedule?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I'd like to set.
You want to put names
Yeah,
in
I
there?
would. Yeah,
I'll do the 13th with you if you
Okay.
want, unless you'd
And
rather
I'll-
do it with
I'll
Lori.
do the 20th with you.
Let's do it. Tim and I on the 13th.
I'm not here on the 13th.
Lori and I on the 20th.
Okay.
Perfect.
And then we'll go from there.
We'll go from there.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Any other business? Well, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending tonight. Really appreciate your patience. Please don't leave until you've signed all documents that need to be signed. Thank you and good night.